Yeah, no, she resigned, but she's kind of ex officio at this point. Okay. All right, the minutes for February 11th, I should tell you that I have given Diane about 4 or 5 typo corrections. That's all they are. They're minor. So rather than going over them in the meeting, they're just very, very small corrections. Are there any other changes, corrections to the minutes of February 11th that anybody would like to make? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Well, Diane, you did not include my revisions that I sent?
I did.
No. I assumed they were there, John, so I must admit, I didn't even look.
Every time I made a change with someone's things, I added your initials to the minutes.
No, I mean,
And
just the first item under, number 9.
Number 9,
Yeah, I sent you the email yesterday.
We saw the email.
Because just stating that John Gregg has stated district is open to any additional language, it's the language, there was a sentence, 2 sentences before that.
I'll go back and check it and revise it.
Okay.
I did not copy my email that I sent
I didn't
you.
copy it either because I assumed that. we
Wait a
had
minute,
it.
I have it all right here.
Unless I'm looking at the wrong one again.
Hmm? No.
Okay.
It's a package.
That was Jan. Oh, you know what? I bet you I know what happened. I remember this because weather was spelled as the weather, hot and cold.
Well, I always
and not-
misspell.
So I remember doing this. 'Cause
My biggest thing is meetings in the morning, and sometimes it goes MOURN.
That's a bad one.
That's a bad one. I
That's
know.
right, that was a bad one.
Spell check and fix it.
Okay,
No.
so,
I thought
so we
maybe
wanna
I
put,
it under.
we wanna put John's corrections in. Okay,
You know what? You know what I did? I jumped down to 10. If you go to the first bullet in 10, I put it in that bullet. So I just need to take that,
oh,
those sentences and move it off. That's what I did.
oh yeah,
You see it?
yep, I see it, starting with the John Gregor
Yep.
advised.
I knew I had
Yeah,
done
the
it.
February 4 email?
Okay.
Okay, so I'll
Is it-
take that and shift it
And
up.
shift it.
No, during the January PPAC meeting, there was concern as to whether the
Oh, it's-
proposed new maintenance agreement provided our normal review of major maintenance projects. That's where it starts.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
and it goes down to,
It goes right to the end of that first bullet.
Correct.
yes.
I'm gonna move all that.
You'll move
up.
all that, okay,
All
that
of
will
that
all be
goes up
moved.
to-
Okay,
Any further changes?
that's it. I knew I,
If not, I will entertain a motion that the minutes be approved with the changes, the typos suggested, I suggested, and the change.
So moved.
With John. Nancy,
Second.
moved and seconded, all in favor?
Right.
5, aye, approved, 5, okay. Next item on the agenda is member resignation. As I indicated at the last meeting, I did speak with Herb, and he has decided that this is an appropriate time for him to resign. So we will need to seek a new member. I didn't push the issue forward, frankly, because we were in the process of filling two positions on the Alliance Board. And I felt that similar pool of people might be people who would apply to be on PPAC. So I made the unilateral decision to wait until, actually, my thought would be, unless the committee objects, to announce at the Alliance meeting on the 22nd that we have an opening. At that point, the new members of the Alliance Board will be put in place, that we have an opening, and then after that, we go out with our usual kind of letter that says, we have this opening and here's what we're looking for. I don't know.
you're gonna do the call for candidate?
And do the call for candidates, right. And I think we should probably do it in such a way, oh, by the way, Herb said he would, although he's not here today, he would continue to serve until such time as we were able to replace him, for what it's worth.
Hi, Herb.
For what it's worth. So, our next meeting will be April 14th. So it would seem to me that maybe we give people, 3 weeks to send in their forms if they are interested. That's the only, I think the call for candidate form, Diane pretty well covers, probably almost as it stands. You might wanna just send it to me just to be sure.
Okay.
Check it, but, and then so maybe give people 3 weeks, after we send out the call for candidates, and then we would have names by the time we reach our April 14th meeting. Is that-
Okay, yeah, the other thing I would suggest is, since we know there's an opening,
Yeah,
if we have an opportunity to
absolutely.
talk to anybody that we think might be interested or whatever, to,
Yes, and in fact, I would encourage that, because frankly, we only got 3 candidates for the Alliance Board, and I'm concerned about us getting somebody, so if you know of any people that you think would serve, that would be great. Nancy, particularly you, living in the new area, it would be good to, if we could, get another person from Cypress Grove.
Is there any
someplace.
particular qualifications you're looking for?
Well, we've said it will be on the call for candidates, but it seems to me in the past, we usually said, number one, it would be good if they were a full-year person.
Okay.
That would be very desirable, but it would have to do with past experience, have they served on boards of this type?
Okay.
They're obviously, their interest in Pelican Preserve, their knowledge of what's going on in the community, that kind of thing.
now, when we filled Chris's position, we had the specifics about the accounting.
But that's not necessary in this case, so that we will take out of the call for candidate. Because we were specifically looking for somebody with your background and skills. This time it will not be.
Right.
That'll be, thanks Nancy, that's a good point.
I have a question.
Yes,
When is the Alliance meeting? Did you say the 22nd?
22nd
March.
of March,
22nd of March, okay.
22nd of March.
And can you, give me who moved for the approval of the minutes and
I
who
did.
seconded?
Nancy did and Ron seconded.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on that? I definitely feel, that brings to the fore just a comment, and maybe Nancy could fill us in. At the time that PPAC was formed, were there any, ground rules, any kind of thing that was put forth as to how long members might serve, any kind of charter of that kind?
When PPAC was initially formed,
Yeah.
we did a call for candidates, but it was put out as being a very short duration project, because the
Mhm.
project was exclusively to rewrite the agreement between the district and WCI.
Right.
And I think their basic assignment was to conclude at the end of 3 months or something.
Mhm.
At that point, after that many weeks or months, the board decided, hey, it was probably a pretty good thing to keep the group going. And there were no particular rules set. That we were fortunate that Ned Hiley and Bob Geppert, part of the original group, also agreed to stay on. And then I had been involved peripherally, but not in the group from the beginning. So that's when I came on the board. But we did the solicitation.
Yeah. Well, that brings to mind, and I'd ask the members to think about it, it seems to me that at some point, perhaps we ought to create,
Rotation.
well, not necessarily just rotation, but just, yeah, you know, how this operates a little bit.
Ah.
What, yeah, the rotation being one of the things, how long should members serve, you know, that kind of thing, the kind of thing that the, you know, the Alliance Board has. I don't think it needs to be that elaborate, but just something, that would address that, because, you know, we've kind of done a catch as catch can, somebody drops off and then we choose somebody new.
The difference is, like, the Alliance or a homeowners association are elected,
That's correct,
and, I mean, ours are all, this is strictly a voluntary,
yes.
I don't, which we could do as a voluntary group,
Mhm.
decide what we wanna do. But from an election standpoint, those things are a little different. They're set up with Florida statutes in certain ways.
Mhm.
No, the Alliance is
No,
not.
the
The
Alliance-
Alliance,
No.
but they have
They're
terms as
non-
well.
They decided to
So if when we do it,
terms.
we could use that as a blueprint on how it was
Yeah.
set up. Yeah, that's a good point. The
We-
Alliance is not
And it's, and their terms are staggered,
Yes, right.
so.
You always
that-
wanna do
They
a
just-
staggered,
Yeah.
you
They
always
just-
wanna do a staggered.
Just change
thing,
them,
yeah.
they just changed them to staggered terms.
Right.
And, you know, we'll need to decide, you know, what makes sense for this group. I mean, I think there's tremendous value in having people who have had long service on the group, like Bob and Nancy, at least in the beginning. But also, you know, perhaps having some kind of turnover.
Hmm.
What,
Um,
and I agree with that, but, I think there needs to be a way to capture the historical memory
Yes,
of the group.
absolutely, yeah.
For
Because,
continuity.
yeah,
Yes.
because, when I came back, when I left, for instance, we were pretty close, I thought, with the commitments we had with the ponds and everything, to using up this reserve money that was out there from the bond money. And so I never thought to question it. I came on after the last full budget was approved, so I didn't go back and look at the numbers, and I was floored when Bill said you needed to look about what you're gonna do with that bunch of money that's sitting out there. And I think it probably took everybody else a little by surprise that there was this big pool of money.
Mhm.
So, I'm surprised that Bob or Ned or somebody didn't pass that
Yeah.
along.
Mhm.
But there needs to be a way to capture some of these material things, like if there is a substantial pot of money that needs to be spent, or refunded back to the community in some fashion.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. I suppose you could set it up in a way that people could apply again if they wanted to
Yeah.
continue serving.
Sure.
You know, I think, you know, eventually, some people get to the point where they just say, I've had enough, you know, but,
When there comes a time it's also good for new ideas to come up
Yes,
too.
yeah.
Because the community's changing.
exactly. And the point being, as we said, Nancy, you know, it would be good to get a little bit broader representation, perhaps, in terms of, community neighborhoods that are represented. Would probably be a good idea. So anyway, I ask you to think about that. Maybe the next meeting, if somebody, you know, maybe we'll take this up, and if somebody's willing to maybe undertake some kind of a draft, at that point, we can do that.
Let me throw one more
Sure.
thought out. I'm thinking from Gebhardt's
Yes.
historical perspective, being in charge of the ponds group.
Right.
That maybe we wanna think of having quote-unquote permanent committees, such as the ponds group or the
Mhm.
safety and security.
Permanent work groups.
Work group, excuse me, work group. But we don't necessarily have to have the leadership be one of us.
Right,
You know what I'm saying? 'Cause
Yeah.
I know like in the CDD, they've got these
Oh, yeah.
groups out there
Yeah.
that report to them,
Yeah.
but they are not direct members.
right,
Not to say you don't have the liaison with them or something
Right.
like that. Somebody's charged, you keep an eye on what's going
Sure.
on.
yeah.
But they don't have to be the leader necessarily.
Good thought.
Okay, so
Good thought.
that's another way of
Another
getting
way
more
of
people
thinking
out
about
there to
that.
be in the leadership role.
Yeah,
Just a thought.
It
Good
it
thought.
does take a while to really understand what's going on, though.
yes,
I mean, I was on the committee for probably a year and a half before you really realized the interrelationships between WCI and the master.
Oh, yeah, it takes, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
Yeah, absolutely.
oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we had no documentation on assets or anything
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, I'm sure that's an
Legislative
issue, Nancy, you're probably still struggling with a little.
Oh, I'm-
Yeah.
Right.
I actually sat down and kind of drew a little chart out, trying to figure out the flow of where everything was going, because,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're here in the middle of everything, but, yeah, it's tough to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well,
what we're doing.
and I have to tell you that when we started out, the charter was exactly to rewrite the agreement that John has been working to rewrite yet again. And then after that, we thought our charter, and it was our charter at that point, to just look at the items that were in that agreement and monitor the payments between WCI and the district and so forth. And then, as various chairmen sat here and something would come up regarding Pelican, well, throw that to the committee. So the charter has expanded. And pretty much now, if there's something that involves Pelican that the committee thinks needs to be addressed, I think the Board of Supervisors is generally pretty comfortable with.
yeah, things have worked pretty well as of late, I mean, between us and the Board of Supervisors, I think.
Yeah, so maybe there should, if we do something like this, there should be some kind of a statement in there, maybe a broad statement of just what our responsibility is. You know, I must admit, you know, and if you've heard a couple of my presentations to the Alliance meetings, I've usually tried to lay out, you know, some of the things we do, but it probably could be stated a lot more clearly.
Plus the connectivity between us, the Alliance, the
Right.
CBD, the
Exactly.
Master Association, how
yeah.
they all fit together.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's what's
people who've
hard to
been here,
understand,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
people who've been here for 10 or 12 years that don't
they
understand
don't
that.
understand it, I'm having trouble.
You know, so it's not just new folks.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I ask you to, I just kind of bring that up, it had been in my notes to, as something that we, you know, give that some thought, and maybe we'll really wrestle with that at a future meeting. Okay, we're agreed on where we're going with the member resignation. Financial update, Nancy?
Financial, I'm sorry I didn't get these in to you guys. I was working on these balance sheets till this morning, but I'll just pass them around. I've had some problem with QuickBooks.
Oh, well, this is one, let's see, we've got these, right, in our package.
I don't know.
You-
Yeah.
you-
Yeah, Diane?
I don't
Diane?
know how she would've.
Oh.
Oh, you probably got the ones
Oh, we
from-
got December 31st, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Chris came over and we tried to reconcile them as late as yesterday.
Mhm.
I don't know, she transferred everything to me, and yet some of the numbers didn't come through on my computer the same way, and I don't know if it's an Apple issue. So, as of this morning, I had everything that looks like it's accurate, except the due from general funds, I think is still not quite accurate.
Mhm.
So, that'll get straightened out before next meeting, but, I actually sat there with T accounts last night, just trying to
Yeah.
adjust all the entries and get them down. And I got them so that they were where they should be, and when I'd look at them, I'd take them right off the journal entries from QuickBooks.
Right.
I'd get my numbers where I thought they should be, and I'd look at the number on QuickBooks and it wouldn't be the same. So, somewhere I gotta figure out, there's something missing in there,
Mhm.
but I'll get that piece together and get it figured out. I did go back and look at, we talked about the CDs last
Yes,
month, and
yes.
whether they were staggered.
Yeah.
And we do have 6, 12, and 18-month CDs.
Mhm.
So they'll renew as needed after
I see.
that,
Mhm.
to keep them on that same
So
basis.
he didn't do monthly, he didn't do,
He did a 6-month, a 12-month, and an 18-month
And there's 500,000 in each.
in each one, 500,000 in each
500,000.
one, yeah.
and that's, so it's $1.5 million and that's it.
Mhm.
Because originally, what we had approved and took to the supervisors was that
$1.2
It'd be
million,
a-
right?
$1.2 million, and it would have been 100,000 each month.
Each month,
Mhm.
correct.
Okay,
So this isn't quite what we asked for.
what we asked for.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose as the first one matures, which won't be that far off, we could maybe move them into those monthly ones.
Well, I'm not sure, I'm not sure there's anything wrong with the 612. Do you feel there's a problem with that? I don't feel there's any problem, but maybe that we should just inform the board that that's what's been done.
Maybe we need
Stephen?
Severn Trent to come and tell us
Mm-hmm.
why they did what they did and
I
what's
thought
the
they did,
implication.
didn't they not?
No,
No.
Stephen was here and we talked
Stephen was
about
here,
the-
we thought we had,
I remember him being here.
yeah.
But so now it's different than what
It's
he
different
presented.
than when he
Than
presented.
what he presented, so
He
let's,
was-
why don't we ask him to come back and explain
Would,
what are we doing now?
yeah, what was he
That makes sense.
contemplating? That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. Can we, April or Diane, can we get Stephen at our next meeting?
For the next meeting,
Yeah,
is it something that we could just
Call him.
ask him and
Sure.
get the answer? Or are you guys talking about a 30-day CD, or what are you talking about,
no,
$100,000?
no, we're talking about,
Every month?
It was a one-year CD laddered. This month we put $100,000 in a one-year CD that matures in 12 months. Next month, we'll have another one that goes out 12 months. So we have, then we'll have one at 11 months and one at 12 months due. The one after that would go out 12 months, and that would be then one at 10 months, one 11 months, and one 12 months.
so that we would have them coming, they would be taken
Staggered
out
in
and
terms of
maturing once a month.
They'd be maturing once a month,
Once-
100,000,
And then we could reinvest them if we needed to.
or spend them if we needed to.
Yeah. And that's not exactly what he did, and I guess, it's not necessary that he attend the meeting, but we would like some explanation as to why he changed,
What was approved?
what was approved.
Well, he did two things, change
The amount.
The
the
amount.
monthly thing and the
And
total
amount.
amount. he
The
changed.
total amount is $1.5 million
So-
rather than $1.2 million,
Yeah, so
and,
just need
and
to
there's
know.
6, 12, and 18
18
months.
Yeah.
When we only wanted to go out 12,
Right.
so.
So,
That's what we approved anyway. I mean,
Yeah, and-
Not that we wouldn't have, not necessarily have approved
Th- th-
1.5, but
right.
that's not what we discussed, and
Right.
we approved 1.2.
yeah, because
And-
that's what he proposed.
Yeah, exactly.
And we
So-
took it to the supervisors, and that's what they approved.
It might be something as simple as far as what the market was bearing as far as.
Yeah, sure.
Well, could be.
Well, and he, either, you could get an explanation from him, which you could tell us about, or he could come, or we could get him on the phone, would be fine. Whatever works best.
So you guys only wanted to go out 12 months?
Well, no, I don't think we're saying that. We wanna know his rationale for
Okay.
doing what he
Doing what he
did,
did.
so that if we feel that it's an adequate rationale, which I'm sure probably will be, we can approve it and take it forward to make sure that the Board of Supervisors knows what we're doing.
Because they need to know, A, that it didn't work exactly the way we planned, but before we take it back to the supervisors, we'd like to explain, before putting Steve on the spot, as to, why that made more sense than what was approved.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay?
I can ask him that.
Okay.
Mhm.
When we're talking about the financials and the next meeting and so forth, it's budget time too. And so, our budget is due to the supervisors in May, usually. I think under the agreement, John, doesn't it say May?
Yes, I think so.
So we're in March
March already.
already.
So we need to have a preliminary thing to look at in April, if we're gonna
Yeah.
get it to them in May.
Exactly.
Just to start with.
Yeah.
Even if we have to come back in May to.
Chris has
something
been
else.
through this 2 or 3 times, and Sarah, is this your first year doing the budget with us?
No. she did.
Working on the CDD budget, I helped Chris a little bit near the end, but Tracy had started it, so we
Okay.
kinda tag team.
So,
Okay, so.
You-
Sarah
you
has
have to,
some-
you have to work
Sarah,
very
Chris.
closely with Sarah, because
Yeah.
she's got a lot of the
And
information.
another thing Chris had mentioned to me related to the budget is that it's been a long time since we've looked at the landscaping contract, and that it might be time soon to start getting some estimates on that.
Mhm.
That's something I
Yeah,
guess
didn't
she
we-
said.
When does the contract, yeah. when
We
does-
approved like a 1-year extension, I think, some time ago.
Did we?
Well-
The 3-year contract to start with?
Well, what Chris
Maybe?
told me was that 2 years ago, they were going to look at it again, but I think it was Tracy was taking over then, and Mary Beth suggested leaving it as is because you had a new person, and then the next year, Tracy was leaving, so once again, it got put off for a year, so it should have been done 2 years ago, and she thought maybe this year might be when we wanna start looking at
Mhm.
that again.
Do we know when it actually expires?
Let's see. It was signed on 22nd of May 2012, commencing June 2012, so,
So that's 4 years ago
Assumedly.
come June.
Assumedly in June.
and then it was a 24-month, it was a 2-year, so I think it was, you're right, it's just kind of been extending year to year. You probably, most contracts are written with a 30-day out.
Yeah.
So you're at a point now where you could bid it out, and
Okay.
if you needed to make a change, you
Okay.
could.
So would it be appropriate to ask Sarah to initiate the package for us to look at, or
Yeah.
the
Well, you would
RFP?
take your current specs, and then we would have to decide if
Yes.
those are working.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
we do
then-
have to look
And
at
then
the specs.
you would probably vote and decide what you wanted to increase, decrease, or see different, and then we would put that out to multiple companies.
Could you get the specs out to, actually get to Diane, and she could get them out to the rest of the committee?
Yeah.
And Diane, if we could put that in our, obviously on the agenda for the
Sure.
next meeting.
And any comments you might have in terms of making it better from your perspective? Could you deal with it,
I'm
you know?
pretty happy with Ameriscape.
Okay.
I still work with other landscape companies and other properties, and I'm pretty pleased with what they put out and their response time and their customer service, and that's, that aspect of reporting and stuff. They have a lot of history there, and they know every inch of that property, and that's
Sure.
something that is gonna have a lot of growing pains, when you make a change.
Is Mary Beth now with a landscape company?
Yeah, she is.
She is.
I mean, would that,
She's with Mainscape.
She's with
Yeah,
that's-
Mainscape
she-
now.
is that who has Gateway?
And they do have Gateway. They were on site at Pelican before Ameriscape took over. They were asked, that contract was terminated. So Mary Beth has been in my office, of course, she wants that contract back, but there was a bad taste left when Mainscape was left that property. So, not to say that people don't change and improve, but, it would be a pretty big project to switch over to somebody else, and I mean, it's fair that you should bid it out, and I think Ameriscape would be on that bid list,
Mhm.
and maybe you can look at the price, they could do something if they wanted to keep
Was- was-
Is,
was-
excuse me, is Mainscape still doing the work for Castle?
I'm sorry, is Mainscape?
Is
doing work-
Mainscape still doing the property that WCI still owns and hasn't turned over?
No.
No, that's always
No.
Ameriscape.
It's all
No,
Ameriscape.
It's all
I mean,
Ameriscape, huh?
Ameriscape at Pelican, but there's several other, Mainscape is on some other sites.
No, originally the communities were all supposed to be using Mainscape.
Correct. And Mainscape was terminated
Mainscape was
in
terminated.
2012, which is when Ameriscape took over the contract.
And-
Okay, because
So
we,
they're going on 4 years.
And,
We-
and they took over the contracts not only for the master, but also for the unturned over
For
community.
majority of the subs, and a lot of
Right.
them that have turned over still
Have
keep
retained.
Ameriscape.
yeah, because Mainscapes didn't have didn't ever actually take over the master, because, I remember getting off a plane in Seattle and getting a phone call from Ned, saying what was happening, and we hadn't had any say in that, so we said, time out, we need to look at this and bid that part of it. So that's how the master stayed with Ameriscapes, but Mainscapes kept doing the rest of the work for Castle and the community.
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be Castle, it would be like WCI, or
Or
whoever the
W-
developer or the board is.
WCI, yeah.
Castle does it, we don't get the contract, we are a contracted vendor. So-
Right, but
Right.
you would have overseen the work
Right,
of, yeah,
right, we manage the contracts.
right.
you know.
But that was stopped for
Mhm.
but it went on for the different communities.
Well-
But there's no Mainscape in
In
Pelican
Pelican
Reserve
now.
I don't think there's any Mainscape at all.
No.
No,
There currently is not, I
No,
think
there's
she's
6
talked
or
to some of
7
the
different,
subs.
community,
Oh, yeah.
managers, but Mainscaper's not one of them.
No.
Or at least the last time I surveyed, they were not. Well, suffice it to say, we wanna put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and Sarah will get the specs to us, and Sarah, your input in the process will clearly be very important to us, cause you're the one who works with them day in and day out. but nonetheless, it's a process we need to get started.
Mhm.
And in addition, Nancy, I guess,
I'll
The-
get
the
together
budget.
with Sarah to
get
start
with
looking
Sarah,
at the budget.
Start looking at the budget, yep. Nancy, anything further? Are there any major expenses where we're way off the beam that we should
No,
be
there
looking at?
wasn't anything major this past month, not even any huge pond expenses this month.
I love it.
Yeah. Any other questions on financials?
Just one,
Sure.
it just has to do with creating next year's budget.
Yep.
Last year's budget, we had programmed money for the turnover of Cypress Grove, the road itself, as well as landscape, which didn't happen last year.
Right.
And we budgeted again this year, and it still hasn't happened yet. So as you go through that budgeting process, can you also look at, here's what we wanna spend, but here's where the money would come from to pay for it,
Okay,
okay? 'Cause it just seems to me there should be money left in the budget, cause we programmed it and we're not spending it.
Yes, well, yes,
So-
that,
so
well,
that's the other
I
side of
think
the
it-
budget.
I think it goes to looking at the estimate for what we're gonna spend this year and seeing how much of a surplus we're gonna have.
Right, I
And
mean,
you're
that's what
sa-
I'm
you're
getting
saying
at,
to
the
ca-
source, the
to
source
car-
of money to pay for the
carry
budget
over,
item.
what kind of a surplus we
Right.
might be able to carry over.
Right, or use to
Mhm.
pay for some of the
Yeah,
budget items.
now
No,
we-
we are spending money.
We're spending some.
We're spending,
no
we're
question
spending
about it.
money we haven't budgeted for.
That's right.
Right, and that's my point,
Yeah.
you know, in my brain, I'm saying, you know, we got a whole bunch of dollars that we programmed that we're not spending on that
Right.
item.
Item.
Maybe there's other things we need to spend it on, fine, but we need to have that analysis done,
For
so we
instance,
can look at that.
the LED lighting project
Right.
was one we did not have in the budget, and we in effect, we're saying to ourselves, we're gonna have extra money because of the Cypress Grove thing, we can do it, we can spend it on that.
Right.
So, yeah,
So we are intending to spend some of it.
some of
Some
it,
of it,
Yeah,
but, you know, this is the second year we've programmed it and
Yes.
not spent it on that
right,
item,
absolutely,
if you will.
good point.
I have another item on the Cypress Grove. Tony is adamant, it's this existing money, Sarah, that we are paying for the streetlights on Cypress Grove, we should not be paying.
And you remember, we reached out to David on that.
And David, I sent those
Yeah.
documents that David Caldwell sent to Tony. Tony reviewed them and said, still, that does not show that
Right, it was kind of like we have a mutual agreement, but there was nothing.
there is, yeah, unless David has pure documentation, and you and I can go over that on Monday again. And he feels if David cannot furnish that documentation, that we should ask for the money back.
Now, this is not just for Cypress Grove itself, but all of the communities?
At this
Remember we
point,
had that-
whatever has not been turned over, the
Mhm.
main road,
And none of it has, as far as I know.
and it's
Right.
just the lighting you're talking about?
right,
The-
the
the
streetlight,
streets.
the FPL contract itself.
Right.
Unless there's some documentation that the CDD was, you know, had the contract or
Mm.
developed the contract with Florida Power and Light.
well, one of the things just to keep in mind, and I have no idea exactly where I would come out on the issue of this, but it's really which pocket it comes out of, whether it comes out of the CDD pocket or it comes out of the Master Association
But
pocket.
I think that, but that's, to me, that's an open question. If the road has not been turned over, okay, does the Master Association have an obligation to pay for lighting? Different question. I think from our perspective, we need to look at it from a CDD point of view. Should the CDD be paying for it, yes or no? And then it becomes a Master Association / WCI construction issue. Now, maybe the community ends up paying for it, but it comes out of a different pot of money. You're absolutely right, but maybe not. Maybe it should be the WCI construction budget, or whatever that is, keeps paying for it until the road's turned over.
I think that's probably a long shot, but
You know?
it's worth
Well, I
asking.
mean, but that becomes a
Well,
WCI kind
well,
of discussion
I mean-
versus a
I
CDD
mean,
discussion.
Right now, the landscaping that's being done in Cypress Grove, is that being covered by WCI?
As far as I know, yeah.
Well, yes, it was being paid by WCI, it's been picked up by the master, but they deficit funded the master, so still, yes, it's WCI.
Yeah.
So, but it's not the CDD paying for that.
No,
Right.
It's not coming out our, quote
Right.
unquote, our
Yeah,
budget.
because at this point, at the very least, if it were not a CDD and it became a master thing, WCI would at least be picking up part of the tab. Right? Because WCI deficit funds, I mean, they've got 800 units they haven't finished.
Well, they're still, whatever,
Yeah.
they're paying us for the ERUs too.
Yes, right.
So,
Yeah.
But there's two
How do we
different
wanna handle
discussions
that? I mean, I could bring it up in my committee, but. how
I
do we
think,
wanna-
I think you should bring it up in committee, and then if you need to, return to us, and we'll decide how to
Well, I
move
mean,
forward.
this is, I'm returning it to you, but I mean, I
Okay.
can bring it up in my report, or do you wanna
Yes.
do it in the budget?
Well, we-
This is part of the
Well-
budget.
We need to know before we do the budget whether
Yes.
we can do
Right.
that or not.
I mean, it sounds like it should be part of John's discussion that could affect the budget.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean, are we or are we not obligated to pay it? And right now, our lawyer's saying we shouldn't unless
Well, we could
WCI
go back to
can come up with-
WCI and ask if they.
Yeah, I think that's what we need, that's the action,
Yeah.
is to find out whether Caldwell and Company have some documentation that supports.
Well, he did furnish what he thought was legal documentation. Tony is saying it is not from his standpoint.
Right. Okay.
And what would happen then in that particular case is we would actually get money back, right, at this point?
We would
Well-
ask for it.
Oh, we would- Well, if we won the argument,
Yeah.
yeah,
We'd be entitled to it.
we'd be entitled.
At the very least, we would stop any future payments
Right,
and let FPL go after the other guy, when they don't get the bill paid, that they're submitting to Sarah to pay every month or whatever it is.
Well, that comes to the question, do we wanna, at this point, continue to pay it?
Well, I think
Or go to
we owe
WCI.
WCI the opportunity to come back and say, no, you're wrong and here's why,
Okay.
before we say we're cutting it off.
Mhm.
I mean, after that happens, then if it's not adequate based on Tony's review, we should stop paying the bill.
I mean, is there some back and forth still to be done, or is the decision?
Well, Tony is asking us to go back to WCI and if they have further documentation with, for
Okay.
a bond rate.
Well, then that's what I
That's the
think
action.
you need to bring back
Okay.
to the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Anything more on finances? Okay. Our very interesting bond money
yeah.
issue.
There's,
It's almost as bad as the oak trees, but not quite.
yeah. There's, $1,289,000, I guess we decided, in the account. And, we had said at the last meeting that we thought there were about 400,000 that we were comfortable saying we could use for the infrastructure of phase one. I had a conference call yesterday afternoon with Tony and bond counsel. Stephen was on it, April was on it, Danny Nelson was on it. I forget who else, but it was a bunch of us on it. And the crux of it is we're gonna have another call on Monday after the bond council looks at some more information. But we brought forward Bill Guy's hypothesis of old WCI versus new WCI, and you know, because of the bankruptcy, was WCI entitled to be reimbursed for any of that, for the work they did on, so that's not gonna be a question, I don't think that'll be answered before, or on Monday yet, but the whole thing is to go back and look at, it was done in the early days of the bankruptcy and what the bankruptcy court approved to be done and so forth. But, but having said all of that, Danny had been back to David Caldwell, who said, well, he guessed, and this was not a firm number by any means, but he said probably 550,000 or so out of that $1,289,000 was probably what they'd done that was, would have been part of the Johnson Engineering report funds that were sitting there. And so that then upped our pool to where we're now up to about 650.
Yeah, because they wanted more than that back last time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they wanted something like 860 or something. That was Danny's calculation.
Right.
So after having talked to David, it's, now changed slightly, but, the question's been raised because it's old WCI versus new WCI. There's a possibility that maybe WCI can't get any of the funds. That's still up in the air, the way I thought it was left.
When you say can't get, so it would be possible that we would have $1,289,000 available?
That is a possibility, that there could be the whole $1,289,000.
But that's only to pay for very specific kinds of things.
That's to be used for infrastructure things, and what we talked about yesterday were some of the infrastructure things that at least I was aware we were talking about. The aeration of the ponds, the pond bank restoration, the piping,
All the drainage?
of the drainage.
Yep.
And then, depending on what the traffic study shows, would a possible restriping of at least Pelican Preserve Boulevard be, could that be part of it? And the bond council, he wasn't jumping through hoops without seeing something in writing exactly, but he said all of those are possibilities that could be used. So, so I think we'll know more maybe on Monday after he looks at the documents. But there will be some more back and forth with WCI, and they need to look at what was approved under the bankruptcy court. What I asked Diane to have available for you, this was, when I first started talking about this resolution that goes back to 2008, 05A, 2008, in May. This was the meeting that I sat in where WCI came in with Johnson Engineering and said, here are the items that are left, here's what it's gonna cost to finish them. There was a Series A, Series B bond. And there was something like $8 million left in the B account with interest that was over $11 million. And so what they wanted to do was to put, it was a little less than $2 million that they wanted, that Johnson Engineering said needed to be set aside to finish Pelican Phase 1. And so WCI wanted the rest of that to go into bond redemption account. So the supervisors, under Pete Dora as chairman at that point, said, well, that's all well and good, but we think there needs to be a contingency account. And so, with Paul and I sitting in the audience going, we didn't know about the water issue at that point. The Pelican hadn't flooded, so we had no idea about the water issue. Paul and I are sitting there saying, to the supervisors, higher. So it got up to $2.5 million. And so that's what the supervisors approved should be set aside. And the rest of the money, they did go through with the bond redemption and followed through with that. The bond counsel that was on the phone with us, apparently was counsel that was party to that. So, this morning, I have no idea where my copy of this went over that many years, probably in the shredder, but, it was good to find this again. Tony sent it, and so I forwarded it on to Bill, since Bill he wasn't on the board and he didn't seem to understand what had happened, so I sent that to him, kind of an FYI if he didn't already have it at this point. But, so, we're still up in the air. The number that we can use, seems to be getting higher. Whether we'll ever go to the $1,289,000, I don't know, but, there seems to be more available for us to use for projects.
It seems pretty sure that there'll at least be some.
Yes, there are some, and, we do have the option, and this is something that, bond counsel asked, and I spoke for myself, but I said I think I'm speaking on behalf of the committee and probably on behalf of the supervisors, but that we would rather than keep charging, our residents for some of these big ticket items like the pond stuff and so forth, we would rather use the money for infrastructure issues that need to be fixed, rather than go into the bond redemption fund. So, I said, that's me talking, and Tony made it clear, yeah, that's Nancy. He said, but I agree with her that it's probably the sentiment of the committee and the supervisors that we would want to use it, on infrastructure issues.
Mhm.
So, that's the story. We'll maybe know more on Monday.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, well, the saga continues. I think it's the sense of the committee that we would prefer to use the money on infrastructure.
Sure.
I think you were pretty safe in saying that, so now you can say it perfectly.
At least the sense of the committee, not
Yes.
the board, okay?
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, GSCDD board meeting report. There were two of them you got, one from me and one from Ron. I would just ask if there are any questions about them. Ron, I do have a question on yours. I'm just kind of curious. They were talking about the stormwater ponds management report, and they got into the whole drainage thing, I guess. And the supervisors want a letter to go out to every association within Gateway outlining issues and possible consequences. Do you know, or April, do you know, was that done? Or is that being done?
This was, Mrs. Moore, remember about the gutters and the drain piping?
Drainage and all of
Communities that
that.
didn't have it, wanting them to pay to put it in, and if they don't put it in, and there's resulting damage to the ponds, they may be held responsible.
I think
And there's a letter
that's-
going out to explain that.
I think that has been put on hold as, we need to regroup as far as what we wanna, comment to
Mhm.
the residents. It was a broad conversation about maybe offering some sort of, incentive, or a discount program, and I think, we wanted to regroup on exactly what we wanted to communicate. So, I know Cal talked to one of the supervisors about it, and I don't know at this time when that conversation is going to come up again, whether it'll come up at a workshop or at another board meeting. But I do know, as of now, there's been no direction to compile that letter to the resident.
Yeah, Bob Geppert outlined at our other meeting,
Oh, yes.
that there
Well,
might
yeah.
be some additional
We-
incentive money to go to each
Well,
community that would
right.
be,
I mean,
based on some prorated.
Well-
I think at best it could be, an education type of information, but, then we have to, how do we wanna do that? Is that something that we wanna use the website for? I mean, as far as education, there's different methods of communicating that, so I think we just need to kind of regroup on exactly what we wanna communicate.
I would say from the perspective of Pelican Preserve, that our neighborhoods have been pretty well informed about this. And as a matter of fact, at the president's meeting this morning, Doug Zanter he has compiled, it was really a lion's share, a lot of work, has compiled a matrix for all of old Pelican Preserve, that is non-Cypress Grove Pelican Preserve, of every home
Oh, wow.
in every community. He's got a matrix that shows whether they have drainage, whether they have gutters. It's really amazing.
Where did he get all that?
He went and surveyed all the homes.
Oh, he walked around?
He
Wow.
walked around.
Who is
And
this?
Doug Zanter.
He's on the Ponds Group?
He's on the Ponds Group. I was just absolutely taken aback over the amount of work, because we were talking about hundreds of homes, and he's got this big matrix. He presented the summary matrix by community this morning, but then Sarah sent out to all the presidents the detailed matrix, and it lists every single home in the community, and whether it has drainage, whether it has gutters, the whole thing. And so, we are pushing forward with this thing, as far as Pelican Preserve is concerned. I think, obviously, Gateway's a little bit behind, considerably behind us in that regard, but,
Well, I think with the exception of, I'm not sure about Solera so much, but Matarita one
yeah,
and Corona, I guess.
and sort of-
That was optional, if I remember
That's correct.
correctly, for them.
That's
Some, were they on this matrix? Those
No,
folks?
no, this
Oh,
was,
okay.
this was the
Yeah,
old.
I think Old Pelican, everybody had it.
No,
No, no.
believe it or not,
Really?
Our,
There was all part of
our,
the,
our community at, Portofino, no, it's, I'd play maybe 60% have it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Some
gotcha.
have
Gotcha.
half gutters.
Right, yeah, gotcha.
yeah.
Well, see, we
Okay.
were set up to drain forward to the street, not back to the pond.
Well,
So-
some are,
Some are.
some go both ways.
Some go
You
both
know.
ways, but there are, homes that are not on the ponds should be draining to the street, and
Right.
ultimately that gets to the
Well,
pond.
we're on the pond and we go to the street.
Yeah,
But
well,
the
that's
street
true,
goes to
that's
the
true,
pond.
that's true in some communities, and that's acceptable. And he, Doug's, I'm afraid I didn't bring it, but he actually had a, as they say, this matrix in which he told the percent that had been done in each community.
There it is.
There it is.
Make a copy?
Well, no, I don't think it's necessary at this juncture, but thank you. So, yeah, you know, just to say that we at least have been moving forward on this
We
issue.
actually have it, it's in Bob Gilbert's report.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's in Bob's
Oh,
report.
but we haven't gotten to it,
Okay,
okay?
okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Great, thank you, Diane.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So you can see, if you go to Bob's report,
Nancy Portofino.
There it is.
15%.
yeah, Portofino is one of the communities that really has a, you know, they're way behind, if you will.
If this is right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Wow, it was off.
yeah,
Yeah,
And-
you said
and-
it was 60.
yeah, and it turns out, of course, it's either putting on gutters, and as you see that, there are quite a number of communities where, for instance, Portofino, only 8 of the 13 homes, apparently.
50 homes.
Of 50 homes have gutters.
That doesn't
Or
sound right.
8
That
of 30.
doesn't, I know that's not right.
That doesn't sound right.
Well, you need to
Well,
understand that he
full
differentiated.
gutters,
I was gonna say, he differentiated
gutters.
between what he calls stupid gutters, which are, which are the gutters at the front of the house.
Yes,
So you don't
okay.
have to walk through the rain when you walk out the
Right,
door.
Right.
But he said, he's talking about full gutters, and there are that many that don't have full gutters.
He only says we have 2 bubblers. Boy, I'm fortunate, I have 2 bubblers.
Do you? Well, okay,
Might
and
be my
maybe
only
some of
loss.
this, needs to be corrected, but anyway, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not inexpensive, you know, because it's not only putting in the gutters, but even if you, or drainage, but if you have drainage, you probably have to get it cleaned out, because most of
Well, I
it's
know one of my drains is completely clogged.
mostly clogged up,
I know
and
that.
as a matter of fact, my community was the kind of pilot case where we went in and actually did all the stuff. Of course, we're a little community,
Mm.
and we had drains in most places, but between putting in the drains we needed and getting the other drains unclogged, it cost $4,700, which.
Total.
Which is a couple $100 a house.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have to put the drains in, if you actually have to put the drains in, that's much more expensive. I think you said $1,000 to $1,500.
How many of your drains were clogged?
I can't tell you that, John. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, because I know part of mine was clogged, I had to get it cleaned out.
Yeah, and, by the way, and the unclogging of the drains is something that's gonna have to happen every couple of years. Communities are gonna have to
Gotta
go
be
in.
checked anyway.
You gotta go in and check them out, and make sure that you're not getting clogged again. So it's gonna be an ongoing expense. Anyway, that was a little bit of a
It's a nice
aside, but I just.
report, yeah, this
yeah,
is good though. This
um,
means- Nancy, this just means the Portofino can get a better percentage of that. We'll let it alone.
If that happens, yes.
Okay, well, we're still on GSCDD
Yes,
reporting.
any other
Any other
comments or
questions or
questions?
comments or questions? I'm sorry, I got us off on a little tangent there, which probably would have come up in the Ponce report anyway. Any other questions on GSCD report? Okay, that having been said, let's get to the Safety and Security Work Group. The reconstituted Safety and Security Work Group has had 2 meetings, and most of them have focused on safety, on traffic safety. We decided that probably at this juncture, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go forward with a traffic study, because by the time we got it done, we'd be out of season. We may at some future time wanna go forward with it, but we think we can do some things that we need to do without a traffic study. One of the things we're really trying to focus on is obviously traffic safety, and we are putting together a presentation for the Alliance meeting, in which I'm gonna talk about traffic safety, and, you know, the main message is really gonna be people's responsibility for caring for their neighbors and for doing the right thing. Obviously, this won't solve the problem, but we wanna get that message out. In addition, as a kind of supplement to that, we're gonna come up with a series of email blasts on various aspects of traffic safety, not to be part of Sarah's weekly report, but to be put out as separate blasts to people about traffic safety. And we hope that, that will help. We're looking at ways to communicate things. One of the ideas that we brought up at our initial meeting was, someone mentioned that we could get to a lot of cars if we put things on windshields at the Tuesdays at the town center things about traffic safety. Joe Smith vetoed that idea. He didn't want it done. We are looking again at the possibility of a contract with the Fort Myers Police Department. That's being reviewed again, and we'll be coming back to you at the next meeting, at the April meeting, on that subject as to where we come out on that, and what our rationale will be one way or the other.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
while you're talking about that?
Sure.
One of my neighbors across the street, and this goes back probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, said to me that he had gotten a business card from a bicycle policeman who was county, who was patrolling Pelican, and who had actually stopped, I don't know, some vehicle, probably a motor vehicle, because they went through a stop sign and they were speeding.
That's reckless driving.
Yeah.
He's allowed to do that.
He's
So-
allowed to do that.
so-
But
he-
who was he? Where'd he
I have no idea how he happened to be in the community. He had the bike, apparently, people who saw him had the bike, when he came in, on a carrier on the back of his police car, parked his.
This is from Lee County now,
Lee
not
County.
Fort Myers.
Lee County parked his car, got on his bike, and was doing some patrolling. I don't know who invited him in, how he got there,
Well,
but,
He doesn't have to be invited.
We're gonna look at, contracts with Fort Myers, but also with Lee County, if that's appropriate. Yeah,
It sounds like you guys need to make contact with Lee County to
Yes.
find out what that was all about.
yeah,
yeah,
Because there's always that issue about who's really got jurisdiction.
yes.
I mean,
Yeah, I
if we're
think
part of Fort Myers.
the city would probably
and-
tell you they have primary jurisdiction, but,
Well, yeah, and
but
that's
they can
true, but
both come
what's
in.
the role that Lee County should play?
Yeah.
If any?
Do you have this guy's card?
I don't, but I can.
Can you
it's
get it, or get me a copy of it?
Probably,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be good.
thought that was just curious.
That is curious.
Did he issue any tickets?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they issued
Yeah,
it.
that's, I think that's the
Not
point,
just-
yeah.
That's the point, he issued a ticket.
And it's for reckless driving, which is a little bit more serious than just passing through a stop sign.
Yeah,
Well, and if that's what's happening, it probably needs to get out to the community, cause that will be enforcement on its own.
Oh, yes, well,
Once
and-
people know that somebody's in there.
Sarah, are
issuing
you aware of
tickets.
that? That somebody was actually issued a citation?
No.
Is that the
I haven't
first one ever in Pelican Reserve?
probably.
Could be, that's why I say it's interesting to contact and find out, what created that issue.
Right.
Why
And
did they
Nancy,
decide to come in?
to
And
your,
how do you invite them back?
Yeah. to your comment,
'Cause that gets great.
the feeling is, and the experience of other communities that have done this is, once you have a few citations issued, and the word gets around, it starts to really get people's attention. And the Fort Myers Police Department, Ron, and you can correct me on this, but it seems to me they have generally come in and issued warnings to start with if they were doing this. And then,
Just to start with, and then,
and then
right,
they issued.
and then give out real tickets.
Real tickets. So, we're definitely, looking at that again. We were also gonna be, and we started discussing the possible revision of the golf cart rules. We unfortunately, Jane Schaefer wasn't available for our meeting, as we wanna get her input, because she has obviously very strong feelings, and at least, she says a lot of documentation as to what needs to be done. So we're gonna hear from her, we're gonna try and hear from somebody from the bike club. We have also gone out to, and asked Tetra Tech to take a look at the roads and what are the possibilities in terms of code and in terms of safety, and what we could do with the lanes if we want to do it. So we're gonna have that input as well, so we're gonna be looking at that whole issue as to how we mark things and how we sign them and that kind of thing. So that's coming up, and we'll doubtless be back to you with that kind of stuff. Other subjects that have come up, that we just kind of briefly touched on and are kind of a little bit further off, are the question of neighborhood speed limits. Now 15 miles an hour, should they be changed? Parking issues, people parking in emergency lanes at the town center, parking issues on, I'm particularly sensitive to it on Trieste Drive. We have a lot of trucks parking there, and it really blocks the road, I don't know what you do about that. Control of vendor and construction vehicles, is there some pressure we can put on vendors and on WCI as far as their construction vehicles are concerned?
In terms of speed?
In terms of speed, and ones who are seen, constantly exceeding the speed limits. The issue was brought up of pedestrian and bicycle entry at the front gate. And this is more of a security issue than it is a safety issue, I think. Should we consider having gates there to prevent to stop bicycles and pedestrians from just entering the community? With some sentiment that kind of thing should be done. So.
Other communities do have that.
Yes, I know they do, Nancy, and that was brought up at the meeting, that there are other communities that do that. Does it make sense? We really didn't get into that one very much, other than that it was brought up as a topic that we might want to address. I realized in looking at the minutes that one of the things I have to take back to the committee is this question of, do we want to put some kind of lighting on the arms we've got going up and down? At this presentation for the Alliance, I plan to say something about security. At this point, we are looking at what we can do to harden the periphery, if you will, and Bob French from Securitas has done some surveying of our periphery, and we need to get into that more in depth. But are there things that we can do to harden the periphery? But I think the main message is gonna be, and Bob certainly made this clear when I met with he and Sarah, that the first line of defense has really gotta be your own house. And we're gonna suggest things that people probably could do to harden up their own houses. One of the things that happened in this recent activity was somebody actually broke the lock on a sliding door and got in. That's how they got into the house in Trentino. They broke the lock on the sliding door, and they walked in, and they were in the family room. Fortunately, the resident who was home, she never woke up. She was asleep in her bedroom. She never woke up. Probably good. But nonetheless, the fact that they were able to break into the sliding door, there are now locks that you can put on your sliding door that prevent them from either being slid or lifted in any way. So there are things like that, and there are motion detectors and using your alarm system and locking your car and all this kind of obvious stuff that we want to perhaps just present as possibilities for people. So I think that's basically it on safety and security, or security and safety work group. I'm open to questions.
Just one comment, the post orders.
Then I was
Okay.
gonna pass it on to you, Ron, to comment
So
on the
I-
post
yeah,
orders.
Tony has contacted me, gave me his comments.
Okay,
I spoke very briefly to Sarah, I haven't sent her the email for her and Bob to, us to get together and talk about those changes.
okay.
Uh,
Tony.
Somebody also suggested to me, and this has to do with, let's say, the couple of cars that had issues and were stolen.
Yes,
All right. Right now, if somebody does walk in and they can start a car, they could easily drive off. Now, this happened at 4 in the morning. Is there a way that the exit gate can be down and they have to go at the guardhouse to exit after 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 in the morning? And if it's a resident, they can always show you their ID card. But if this guy had no pass from you and he's trying to get back through, he's either gonna break the gate, and at that time, when he breaks the gate, the license plate can be.
Yeah, I mean.
You
you
call the
can-
police immediately at that point.
Yeah, you can definitely disable the gate and disable the arm so it doesn't automatically go up. So we'd have to actually check that person out at those hours.
And you're manned there 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
So,
John,
you know, even if.
that's an excellent suggestion. We will look at that.
Okay.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
You need to make sure the residents know, so.
Oh, of course.
Well, I mean, if you have a driver's license, you're gonna know. where it
No,
is.
no.
No,
you
no,
don't
when they pull
as a
up to the
resident.
gate and it doesn't open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've been putting out enough emails, and it's not, you know, when are you gonna leave after 1 o'clock? If there's a lot of parties, that's fine.
Good point.
The residents that come in for that party are already gonna have a pass. And all they do is show you the pass and you let them
And
on.
chances are they
Not a
don't
resident.
No.
Yeah, and if somebody's leaving early in the morning, at 3 or 4 in the morning, to go to the airport, you know,
That's what I
Fine.
was thinking of, if somebody's going to early.
you're still
Early
gonna have a
morning.
driver's license, and
Yeah,
they're
but
gonna
you
know
need
you're a
to
resident.
know Not to go to that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we have to
That's-
decide,
And
we would have to decide what our optimum hours to
Yeah,
do
starting
that.
at
I mean,
6 a.m.
You don't
or
wanna,
something.
you don't wanna make it
Yeah.
a real problem.
Right.
But,
Okay.
yeah, and we do have statistics on the number of cars traveling around at that time.
Oh, yeah.
time,
Oh,
right, Ron?
there aren't a lot.
Yeah,
So
no, I know
it's
they're
not
not.
like there's large volume of
There's
people
not
coming
a
and
lot
going at
after
1 o'clock
9
in the
o'clock.
morning. Exactly, so it's not a big volume issue at all.
You
Yeah.
drive in at 9:15 and it's.
Very quiet.
Yes. So, that's an excellent, we are, as far as I'm concerned, we're open to any suggestions. And we still, I got accosted this morning by a couple of people at the president's meeting about we should reconsider speed bumps, even though we know that the emergency services don't like them.
It's true.
So,
Or rumble strips.
or
which make a lot of
rumble
noise.
strips that make a lot of noise and the residents don't like them. So, there are all of those things, and as far as I'm concerned, everything should be on the table. As the statistics that were provided by Ron and from the traffic signs.
Right.
You don't have a lot of people, the percentage is very small of people who are not obeying, or staying within reasonable striking distance of the speed limits or cruising through the stop signs. I mean, you don't have a lot of that going on. The percentage of people is very small, but as the number grows and the percentage stays the same, it's quite a number of people, and it's very dangerous, and we have had some accidents or near accidents.
Mhm.
So I think that's important.
And there's always those few who think at 2 o'clock in the morning
Yeah,
they
that's
can do
right.
70 miles an
An
hour
hour
at
down.
Pelican Reserve Boulevard.
Yep.
And no stop signs.
Well,
And-
I can't believe they're stopping at the stop sign.
No,
but, you know,
Yeah.
they're going that
If
fast.
they're passing the sign, doing
Yeah.
60+ miles an hour.
Okay. Anything else on safety and security work group? There's some more coming up in Sarah's report, so we'll go on to that if there are no questions. Sarah?
Which,
You,
with Bob here, I think that
Okay.
he should,
mhm.
do you wanna update
Sure.
based off of the email?
Yeah, Bob?
Absolutely, I can do that.
Mm.
Okay, let me just give an update of some of the
Bob-
issues.
Bob, it'd probably be a good idea if you just introduced yourself.
I'm
into the
sorry?
into the microphone.
Okay, got it.
Just so-
There you go.
so the recording-
Bob French with Securitas. I'm the branch manager for this account. Let me go ahead and just kind of give you a brief overview of some of the issues or some of the projects we're working on, I should say. One is that we had to install a barcode scanner at the front gate for the guards to be able to scan visitors back into the community. So there's barcodes on every pass. So we want to make sure the passes aren't being moved from visitor to visitor, and that we can now check them. So I have installed that at the front gate so we can verify that the visitor is who they are. For example, if we go ahead and obtain their driver's license initially, scan it into the system, when they come back with their pass, we scan it, we can see it's the proper person. It improves the efficiency at the gate as well. What I also realized, though, there's a pedestal scanner at the main gatehouse. And that pedestal scanner does actually scan those barcodes. And it does allow them in. So I need to explore that a little bit more as far as the functionality of the scanner. That was put in some time ago, previous to us even.
So I mean, you're talking about the little placards that go on the dashboard?
Yeah, the
They can
placard,
actually
yeah.
read that?
Yeah, it reads
Oh.
that, there's a reader on the left side of the gatehouse. Now, my
Right, 'cause
concern
I
is,
thought that was just for the cars, because we got our barcodes on our windshield.
no, and the other side it reads, the barcode, but there's an actual reader set up for a visitor to go up and actually scan the
I
pass.
remember that.
Yeah. Well, the problem with it is that it's very close to the gatehouse, and my concern is that they're gonna run into the podium built on the gatehouse and could be a safety issue.
But if
So-
that happens, and somebody gets an old, let's say, a month pass,
Mhm.
but they leave in 2 weeks, they can give that pass to somebody else, or, I mean, that pass can be stolen.
Exactly. So what we need to consider in the group is, do we narrow the number of days that we give passes out, cut that window down? There's a benefit and disadvantage to it, is it improves efficiency at the gates. It registers everybody in every time they come in. The guard's concern is that the scanning could slow things down on their end. If they're scanning them, it could slow things down, which, it's a trade-off, I want to register all the vehicles that go into Pelican Preserve every single time. So we may want to shrink that window down where nobody gets a 30-day pass. They may get a 1-week pass. They may get a 1-day pass. If we have the systems set up and established, we can allow for that. So there's a lot of things to be considered there. But my point is that scanner is there. It does work. If we were to further utilize that, we'd have to do some modifications. Things to consider there. But we do have a scanner now in the gatehouse where the guys can actually verify it and scan it and then permit them into the property. As far as, there was an update, and forgive me, I think I filled Sarah in and also Phil on the fact that the on-site guard management, the tracking device, we're going to put that on the property at no cost to the community. Yeah, because I had given you a price on that.
Scan?
Yeah.
Exactly
So
right.
you're gonna have a mobile phone now, no cost to the,
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
I saw that in your email this morning. and I
Yeah,
was
so
pleasantly surprised.
exactly right. Well, when we looked at it, it was not a big deal to do it, and we added that into the contract. I just ordered it, so I'm just waiting for it to come in, and then we're gonna kind of revamp that utilization of that phone. So that will hold accountability to every function that the patrol officers are doing, when they're doing it, where they've been, where they're going, that type of accountability that we need on the community.
You
It's a
recall
gr-
we discussed this, and at the time, it was gonna cost us some money. and we
Oh,
kinda-
yeah,
We kind of, quite a bit.
Substantial amount of money.
It was
Yeah.
$240 a month,
We were
yeah.
questioning, why do we need to know where
Where our guys are.
your guard is?
Yeah.
And
It'll
what
make
should we
everything
do?
electronic as well, so incident reports will become electronic and easy access, where they can take photographs, they can do a full report, much nicer than what we've done in the past. So we're gonna move to that as quickly as possible. I've ordered the phone. As soon as it arrives, we'll implement it. And I think that'll be much improved. We'll be able to keep historical data of how many open garage doors, how many incidents of all types that we have on the property over a year's period. So I'm good with that.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
should the safety and security work group decide where they wanna put?
That, we could start definitely thinking about that,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so.
You
we
know,
need to take that up.
let's start working on that, because as soon as it comes in, we can implement it within a few days, and we're ready to go. So I think that would be of great assistance. We are also looking at doing an upgrade to the capture system, the visitor management system currently at the gatehouse. Visitor management software, the company that owns Capture also bought another company called Dwelling Live. Dwelling Live is a pretty robust system, more so than that of Capture. So I'm putting together pricing, which our pricing is more competitive because we're a dealer than it is with you going directly to Dwelling Live, which could be less of a cost than what you're paying with Capture. It'll be new hardware, a new system. It has an app on it where the residents can schedule their guests via an app. It has a electronic pass like TSA does at the airport. It sends it to your iPhone. You go up, we verify your ID, we scan it, and permit access. It's got some nice features to it, and I think it's far more robust than what we currently have. So it's time for an upgrade, so I'm going to get the pricing for that as well. I did a physical property assessment, walked around the property, the whole exterior of the property. I can tell you, started out at the RV lot and worked my way through golf maintenance and worked my way all the way around, keeping in mind the last incident that we had. Pleasantly surprised at some of the barrier. It was a bit stronger than I thought. For some reason, I had envisioned there was no barriers whatsoever. Some of the weakest points, I think, are actually at the very front of the community on tree line in the entryway. You can literally just walk in across the terrain there and just go right into the community. And there's no fencing there. So I think in the very front of the property, we need to look at improving the fencing, walls, vegetation, whatever we decide would be best served in that area to be a deterrent would be key. The fence is not the largest fence in the world. You can definitely jump that fence or get over that fence. However, it's a fence, and it is a deterrent, and it does run all the way down. What I was surprised at is when I went over to the shopping center where Goodwill and so forth is, where my concern was, there's the wall, and the wall runs all the way in the back of the shopping center, and then it picks up a fence all the way in the back after that. So I walked that whole area, and then there's a lot of terrain, and there's a lot of vegetation back there. So I wasn't overly concerned in that area as much as I originally thought it was going to be. So I'm going to go back to the front entryway is probably an area we need to focus on first. Then, of course, I worked my way all the way back down to the construction gate. And what changed back there for me, because I've been to the construction gate before, was they knocked all the trees down and they're clearing the land. So now we have a much open area where we can just drive an all-terrain vehicle through there easily enough, go right around the gates, and off we go. Walking it, it's quite a distance to, I think, the first neighborhood. It's a little bit of haul. But you can get in, a Jeep or a 4x4 and off you go and go around those gates and you're in the property with no difficulty. What I would think about it, considering depending on the developer, is getting some temporary barriers just to put them around along the area, with the entryway so someone can't easily drive in, depending on what the planning is for the community there as far as developing that area. But something temporary. They even do temporary fencing, just so we don't have vehicles just driving in the community. That would be something that would be considered. But those are by far the two weakest points at this juncture. I was quite surprised, the back of the property and the front of the property. The fencing, like I said, could be better over time, but I think we have to start with the weakest areas first and work our way up. There is, some communities are looking at technology solutions. For example, they're looking at putting cameras on the exterior. So if there's any motion on there, it triggers an event back to the guardhouses and patrol to go investigate. There's been movement on the property, people walking across that grid. A lot of them have explored that. The problem with it, it's very expensive. It's very, it's effective but expensive. It's literally, it goes by human motion. It doesn't go by animals, or it's smart technology. I've yet to have anyone yet install it, but they've considered it. So if anyone does, I'll look at how effective it is, and it's good technology to put in that whole fence line, for example, than building another wall or fence or vegetation. It may be a better solution. So that's something to be considered there. We also have enforced, or we're working with the officers to remind our visitors to abide by the speeding, or rather the speed limits in the community. as each pass is generated, it's on the pass, and I think we're just doing a modification to it slightly, but the bottom line is that we need to remind them of the speed limit in our community as they enter. That is a helpful reminder. That's something we've also looked at implementing. Any,
I think that was one that was brought up at the safety and security
Mhm.
meeting, and Bob is implementing it, so.
Yeah, so that's what I had. Anything else, Sarah, did I miss? I think I got everything there. So obviously, we need to keep working on some of these issues, but more importantly, I want to get that, that software on here, this phone on here. I think that's going to help give us a lot more accountability to what we're doing on those patrol hours. Okay.
Any questions of Bob?
Actually, this one's probably more for Sarah. Do you know, Sarah, where WCI stands? Are all the fences in that they promised at the Harborside Event Center last year, when we were talking about getting started on putting the new pool, and there were, in the DRI, it talks about WCI was gonna fence more of the property.
The last fence that I was told needed to be installed, or was part of that conversation, was back there behind Palazzo, where it butts up to Plantation and New Development, which they have installed that same sort of black, chain link fence there. That's the only one that was outstanding to my knowledge, but I can double check that for you.
Okay, yeah, because they had promised to put a lot of fencing in, as part of coming to an agreement and on the lawsuit and all of that.
I'll have to
But
look into
certainly
that
the
further.
front fencing was a piece of that agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But there was additional periphery kinds of fencing. I don't
Yeah,
remember
the
how it
last section
was.
that I was aware of, like I said, was back in that far
Plazo.
corner. And that was installed just within the last couple of months.
I think part of that has to do with the back portion, that the 190 acres or 180 acres that they added. They had indicated they were gonna put a fence there, which hasn't been done. I mean, they've knocked all the trees down, and you're right, 'cause when you walked it, there's no fence back there at this point at all.
No.
And that's where Bob's suggesting that we put a temporary,
Well, but you have to
But there
think
may
about
be a
that.
plan.
Where the construction gate is,
yeah,
fine, but from there all the way over to where the, Mount Pelican is, there's no fence.
yeah.
Because they just knocked all the trees down now. They're in the process of constructing, so I don't know
Right.
where they are in terms of
That one.
when they would put
Yeah.
a fence up.
If that
But
was
that whole
part of
back end
the,
is open at this point.
And that might not have been a part of the original talk because that's just recently was annexed, so,
Well,
as
I
part.
think it was all part of that annexation.
It was?
discussion,
Okay.
It
That
was
they
all
would
part of
eventually
it.
put fencing around.
Well, then there's definitely,
everything.
then they still have some to go, because that definitely has not been done yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well,
Right,
We're
right,
supposed to
yeah.
have a berm too,
Mhm. Okay, that
with
could be.
fence on it
But-
too, so they-
well, that won't happen until they're done bringing construction traffic through. The
No,
berm will
that's
be the
all-
last
that's all
they
regular
build.
fence now. There's no barbed wire back there anymore. It's all gone. That's what I'm saying, there's no barrier at all in the back of the community because of the construction line. There's no trees left. So,
Amazing what they took down back there.
Oh, yeah, but
Well-
you can see Gateway Boulevard.
Yeah. Okay, well, the Safety and Security Work Group will undertake looking at Bob's recommendations, and we'll be coming back to you with thoughts and ideas. And Ron, you talked earlier about money. Things
Hey,
that
we may have it.
that aren't in the budget,
Yeah.
that we may wanna do, and I don't know whether that would be considered infrastructure or not.
Well, no, that couldn't be,
Yeah.
because it's not phase one
Ah,
to begin
of
with.
course.
And second of all, that's still WCI back there.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not,
Oh, absolutely.
right.
none of that's been turned over.
No, right.
But he's talking about, like, in the front.
Front, for
Oh, in the
example.
front.
Putting new fencing
Yeah,
up there
how
and
about
that kind of
the
stuff.
front, if that wasn't part of the
Yeah.
agreement. Okay. If there are no other questions on that, Sarah's got a,
Yep, I've got two things, actually. One of it piggybacks on the conversation Bob just had. One of the problems that we're having at the guardhouse is our bandwidth. We don't have enough bandwidth to support the amount of internet activity that we use, checking these people in and out and doing these things, we've had multiple problems with the Capture program, and we reach out to Capture, and there's like, everything's fine on our end, so we've had Comcast out several times, and it turns out we have the smallest internet bandwidth package that anybody would ever have. It's like 16 download, 3 upload, so the wait time is ridiculous. They said we need at least 30 megs, 25, 25 down, 10 up, which would add an additional $30 a month to the Comcast bill. So
Oh, so it's a Comcast issue, basically.
we don't have enough internet bandwidth to support what they need to do. So we're recommending increasing the bandwidth so that they can
For an
do that.
extra $30 a month, seems to me that seems pretty clear.
Yeah.
Something we ought to do.
Yep.
I don't know, I don't even, for that amount of money, do we even need a motion? I don't.
What, if you
Well, it
have
wasn't
one.
Well, 'cause it's
it
just a
wasn't budgeted, let's just make a
Like the
motion.
It's a recurring
Okay.
cost, yeah.
Nancy
I move
moves.
that we spend
Second.
the $30 a
John
month.
seconds it, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
5, okay.
The other item that I am bringing to you today is the entrance monuments at Colonial and Tree Line. Winn-Dixie side, Goodwill side. You have the fountains there. There's some pictures here. We had several vendors come out and take a look. There's some pictures here in the package, but it started with, our maintenance guy was going out there on a regular basis, just trying to glue pieces of the molding back to the sign, because it's just deteriorating. There's pictures where it shows where some have just fallen off. There's cracks throughout the features that go all the way down the front of it. It's just, they're in really bad shape. I don't think they've ever been touched up. So I was just asking what it would cost to have them, cleaned, re-stuccoed, all the cracks and repairs and the molding just affixed again, a fresh new paint job. And that's what I have here today, which would include both of the monuments. The trellis is in bad shape as well. I don't think it's ever been treated and painted since the very beginning of time. So there's an option to do the trellis as well on the second page of this proposal. We would have to cut back all the plant material off of the trellis in order to do so, and it would take a couple years for it to grow back over. And I know we all love how it looks right now when it blooms purple. It's very pretty, but that would be the only way to treat the wood trellis. So just want to bring it to your attention. I believe we reserve for these entry features, if I'm correct. Do you reserve in this
No,
budget?
It's
No?
not specifically
What?
reserved for, I don't think.
I don't think so.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I thought I saw a reserve item for entry, but
I think it would be an ongoing
Yeah,
expense.
it's a maintenance item.
Yeah.
In fact, there was some maintenance done, I think 3 years ago, and Mary Beth and I got involved with a couple of those out there.
Waterproof,
the inside of the
they
fountain.
waterproofed it.
Yeah.
Yep.
We did some maintenance on the outside too. This is an ongoing problem.
Is this a shared expense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we pay a percentage?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get the other side to approve it?
Well, we're
We
86,
just,
we're 86%.
we just approve it and they share.
Yeah, they don't get a choice. They just do.
We got 86% of the votes.
And we pay 86% of the budget.
That's right.
So
So we
we're
pay
requesting at
86%
least to
of
do,
what
to
that-
repair the signs and paint them, but the trellis is kind of up to the,
Is this something
P-PAC.
we need to take forward to the supervisors?
Well, I don't-
Probably.
No, not with this amount.
I'm not sure at this amount that we really need to. Remember, we even debated this on the LEDs, which was 30,000, and we did it almost for information. I don't know what the rules are.
I mean, and we,
Another thing,
we were
you know.
saying that this is an item that even the sales department of WCI should be, want to have it nice and have nice lighting and everything there, and it should be nice. I mean,
it needs it.
it needs it, it needs it.
Well, I know we've had a clear go-ahead with anything that's been budgeted.
But it's
But
you're right,
this is
it's
non-budgeted.
non-budgeted. Yeah, that's true.
But somebody's saying this is a maintenance item, not a.
Yeah.
It is a maintenance item.
So
It's
it needs-
budgeted. It's a maintenance item.
Well, no, but we don't have anything.
I mean, they could argue that maintenance would just be repairing one, a crack as it happens versus kind of a full revamp. I don't know. If,
I can't imagine, you can't, on your repair and maintenance, you can't anticipate every little thing on a line item by line item basis as far as including it in your budget. So I would think if you have repair and maintenance budget, then
Well,
Well, we got-
do we have a general repair and maintenance?
No.
Item 4 of our exhibit B is the east and west fountain, tree line, and colonial.
yes.
Entry feature utilities. It's a The owner is the CDD and maintained by master.
But it's not a budgeted item, is the question, John.
Well, there's a
It's a
feature,
maintenance.
there's feature fountain, R&M,
That's repair and maintenance, R&M. But you do have a section, anytime the fountains go down or break, we have them serviced, and that's where it comes out of. I would assume this would fall within the same realm of work, of needing to have it repaired.
This would be the maintenance portion.
Right, I mean, the molding's
Yeah.
falling off, so it's definitely in need of repair.
Nancy, I think your admonition is correct, that we ought to, you know, if we wanna do this, we ought to take it forward.
Yeah, there's a budget line item there for neighborhood monuments maintenance.
Yeah,
This isn't a neighborhood, though.
It would be in the shared section.
yeah,
Shared
Oh,
section.
okay.
Entry features.
yep.
And that's not enough money, is it?
That's not a feature fountain, R&M?
It's an entry feature with fountain. The entire wall is also, has a fountain attached to it. But with this expense, you might end up over budget in that line item with just the regular assumed expenses as well, so that's why I wanted to bring it to you.
Yeah.
What's the total amount again?
10,000.
10,000?
Plus,
90.
plus the.
Oh, plus
Two
4,000.
separate
The
lines.
trellis is separate. The trellis would be 4,300 if you're wanting to do the trellis as well at the same time. Right now, the trellis, you know, sections of it are covered by the bougainvillea, but it was highly recommended when they were out there. They said your trellis needs some work too. So we're gonna add that in, and it's optional.
Let's, my suggestion here would be, Nancy, in working up the budget, one of the things I think you're gonna probably have to look at is our estimated spending for the year, knowing that, to Ron's point, that we haven't had to spend money on Cypress Grove that we thought we would, and there may be other things in there. My suggestion would be that we take a look at this. I mean, a month isn't gonna make a difference, right?
Why would we wait?
Why would we wait?
Yeah, it's, I mean, accept it or,
Well, because I think if we find out we've got adequate funds, it would make it a lot easier to accept it. It's gonna run us over budget. Little hesitant, but John, others may agree with you.
This also begs the question of what about, has anybody really been checking the rest of the monuments in the community? And is this a bigger item? They're all, at least in phase one, they're all now 10, 12.
yeah, but they've been painted and.
Yeah, I look at them once a month when I do my monthly property inspection. We drive every aspect.
Right.
We drive by and we look at them. And I have, my maintenance guy can do like regular stucco repair and painting and filling of those cracks. But this one, it's more damage than what he's capable of doing the correct way. But the other signs, we haven't seen that there's any issues with the inside, the monument signs. The next one that we're wanting to look at after this, because these are in the worst condition, would be the one at the south side of the main entrance of Pelican Preserve, would be what we would look at next. But it's not as near as bad of condition. We're not having to repair it like we do these on a regular basis. So that could be something to potentially budget for next year. But I do look at them monthly.
Feeling?
Yeah, I don't have any problem if we approve it now.
Just go ahead. Okay.
You know, I don't know.
You wanna make a motion?
I think she
Our
has a
budget
question.
person feels comfortable with that or not. I know you're not
Yeah.
totally versed in all of that
Yeah,
yet.
and my concern, if you've got regular repairs going on, how long are we gonna keep paying for repairs?
Yeah.
And then still incur
Mhm.
this expense
Yep.
in the end?
Right.
Okay.
It's
Ron?
gonna cost us more in the long run.
Ron, you wanna make a motion? Do you think we should be doing the trellis too?
Yes.
Okay.
I second.
Ron moves and John seconds.
Can I ask a question? So who is actually contracting, who's authorizing this agreement?
Well, it would be,
Typically, what we've done in the past, when they're approved by P-PAC, then the master just signs off on it, and we
Okay,
have,
so this is a contract with the master HOA.
well, it's being paid
Paid
for
for
by
out
the
of
CDD.
CDD.
CDD
So-
money.
Their contract.
this is the way it works.
It's like-
Welcome to our world.
Because in the O and M, the master, or the management group of the master can, with their approval, proceed with these things.
Well,
It has to go to the CDD too.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
the budget, it's all part of that same budget.
This was stuff that before the bankruptcy would have all been done by the master.
Right.
And we in effect took over the function
Okay.
of monitoring. Okay, we have a motion
Try and
and,
vote.
to accept the full amount of Sarah's proposal. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 5
Okay.
to nothing.
That's all I had, folks.
I think though it
Unless you have
needs to
something for me.
be.
I will,
in-
yes.
We need to make
in
a
effect-
budget.
Pointed
in
out in
effect,
the
Di-
report.
Diane, I think that the motion should read, recommend to the, as we have on some of the others, that we recommend to the GSCD Board of Supervisors, that we undertake this expenditure. And I will put it in the report this month.
And then as you make next year's budget, if you have to create a new line for this kind of stuff.
Right, and
Yeah.
for the
For
potential one
future,
that,
'cause we-
Okay?
yeah.
So are you wanting me to put this on the agenda for the?
I don't think it's,
supervisor
I don't think it's necessary. What I will do is I will put it in the way we did it the last time, I will put it in the report, in the P-PAC report to the GSCDD, and then when the individual one of us who's there, who makes the report, will ask for it at that point. I don't think you need to put it on as an agenda item.
It would be the April 7th.
That's me.
Yeah, so
Um,
Nancy can, it will be in the report, and Nancy will present it to them.
And
as-
what we'll say is that we budgeted, for instance, for the turnover of, Cypress Grove for the year, and that hasn't happened, and so we know we have plenty of funds to cover this, even though it was a non-budgeted item.
Okay.
And April, this is the way we handled, last month, we handled the LED thing, which was a $30,000 item. We handled it the same way, I just presented it as.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify in my mind what it was that you were asking the supervisors for, whether or not they were approving something, because, sometimes it just gets difficult to backtrack and find the things that they've actually approved if
Well,
it's not an
they,
agenda item.
they did approve this, it was, I assume it was in their minutes, because they approved the LED expenditure.
Oh, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
I understand it's in the minutes, but sometimes it's just hard to backtrack and find it when the only information on it is buried in the minutes and it's not an agenda item.
Mhm.
But we'll let
If
it
you want,
roll forward.
if you wanna make it an agenda item, you can do
I
that.
mean, they're not approving the agreement, they're just approving the budget.
They're approving the
The
expenditure,
expenditure.
yeah.
Okay.
It's, if you wanna make it an agenda item, that's
No,
perfectly
I
acceptable.
Well,
think how
well-
you guys are used to rolling is
Yeah.
fine.
Well, let me ask you this, and this goes back, cause I don't think it even came up, with your predecessor while I've been on the board, on the committee, but, you have spending authority, do you not?
It is currently unclear right now, we just read that resolution this week.
Oh, okay, typically, April would have spending authority.
I have authority, it's expressed in the resolution that I have authority for routine payments of the district. It is not clear on what my authority is on the non-routine expenditures.
Okay, so that doesn't help us at all.
Sorry.
See,
It
we were gonna
didn't
blame
help
you,
me
April,
either.
but it's not working.
Cause usually that's something we could go by, that, if it was within your authority, chances are they weren't gonna get too, it's pretty much what they don't wanna see come to them.
Yeah, it's definitely 10,000 would be above
Okay.
the authority. 10,000 is even above the district manager authority. So I know 10,000 is a threshold that requires the supervisor approval.
Then perhaps, if you wanna make it an agenda item, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're more comfortable with that, April, it's not a problem. So as long as we'll have somebody there to
Yeah, I'll present.
present it, Nancy will be there to
You
present
may
it.
wanna, if you do that, you may wanna know what line of the budget the money will be coming from, cause I know, Rod Senior will probably ask that question.
And
Where's it coming from?
I've been trying to report that as well on the agenda items that I provide to the board, so they know that. So do we know
What?
where you're
I don't
anticipating
know if we
spending
know
that
right
out of?
now, but
Well, you guys that wanted to,
What line? Well, it's a,
well,
we can make it,
we're gonna be over
We have-
budget, but we can call it
yeah,
the R and M budget.
and I guess in the shared expenses, we have something called entry feature R and M. We could, it
It'll
would
put-
seem to be the most logical place to put it,
It'll put us over, but
yeah.
I don't see the entry feature on,
706559 is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
um,
oh, okay,
On the shared operating and maintenance
okay, I got it.
expenses, got it?
706559.
559, yeah.
And we don't have enough money in there to just do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's
Or I
why,
doubt it, I don't
I
have a
don't-
budget, I just have the, I kinda doubt it, although it might be worthwhile checking. We can check the budget at some point to see what we've got money in there.
I'm sure if you talk to, what's his name from, Severn Trent,
Severn,
he'll be able to tell you exactly what
Stephen?
to do. Stephen.
Yeah, well,
He'll be able, you know, you'll
we
be-
have the budget, so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
just make sure he's aware of it before it gets presented, so if a question does come up, he might be able to just make those supervisors feel more comfortable if there's any issue.
so we're already over, we've already spent, is that what this is saying?
Well, yes, we are already.
Over
um,
budget.
Over budget in that particular.
Well, this is on a 12-month basis though, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
So, but so we've got 7,000 roughly left,
We'll be over.
and that will put us over.
Sure.
But we've got room in our other accounts. When the supervisors see this, they don't see our breakdown, this is our, so Stephen won't help us with this part. He
Right.
doesn't see this.
He doesn't, yeah.
He just sees a big number for Pelican. So I can say we've got an account that has about 7,000 in it, but we've got room in some of
Other
our
accounts.
others.
Okay. I've made a note to talk to Stephen about it.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
All right, we'll plow ahead here. The next item, front gate damage cost, is something that I put on the agenda. We have, and Sarah can probably speak to this, on a somewhat continuing basis, people who, and I think Don brought it up at the last meeting, people who bump into our gates and knock them off. And we even had somebody who I think ran into the the building out there, is that right? And so we're suffering damage which, for which we are picking up the tab. And the question becomes, should we put something into place, that might, put the tab on the people who do the damage?
Can we identify who's done the damage
Well,
pretty much?
Yeah, cause I think usually when things crash, people probably stop, is that right, Sarah?
We hope.
We hope.
Luckily, the encounters that I've dealt with have just been scrapes, so we've been able to just paint over it, you know, and it hasn't been damage to the structure,
Okay,
luckily.
but how about the gates being knocked
Oh,
off?
yeah, those take a beating. And they do stop, but not to the point where we had to replace them. If you drive up to them and see them, you'll see all the little dents and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
And we've had to drill new holes to reattach it, but we haven't had to buy a gate arm in quite a bit.
Is this a problem we really have to address then, I guess, this is,
I think it's good to have the discussion.
Yeah.
If there was a major incident, like somebody hit the building and caused damage, or they went flying through the gate and I
Yeah.
don't know what happened, but damaged the equipment significantly, I think it should go back on the person that did the damage.
yeah. I had Gary Newbauer was frankly the one who brought this up initially. I had a brief discussion with Tony Pierce this morning about it. And Gary had asked, is there a proper procedure when a truck hits the gatehouse, because it's a CDD asset? And Tony has said a telephone call should be made to the CDD staff, followed by a written report, which I guess
They do incident reports.
they do that, okay. Is there a report form? I guess there probably isn't, it's just a written report. Is there a report form?
They have a two-part form that they deliver one part to the management,
Okay.
and they keep one part, and now it sounds like with this new system, it'll all be electronic.
All be electronic with pictures and everything.
Is it?
Correct.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
good.
Maybe I brought up something that we don't need to do here then. And he said numerous gate drive-throughs that happened last week alone. Do we charge the damager? So, you're not aware of numerous gate drive-throughs? Okay, all right, I'm sorry,
And
I'm
this is,
responding.
yeah,
and I-
this has come up before,
Has it?
that with those gates take a beating, but they're made to accept a pretty good beating.
Yeah, okay. Sounds to me like we don't have a real problem on all
Probably more damage to the vehicles than to the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
gate.
Yep, okay, we'll pass that one by. Ponds Work Group report. Bob obviously is not here. You've got it in your,
Yeah.
package. We've discussed a couple of things about the ponds earlier in the meeting, which I think were the things of interest. The aerator problem is still kind of on the horizon, but right at this point, we don't know what's going to go on. I don't think there's anything dramatic in Bob's report, and so I don't know if there are any questions or comments. As I say, they've done a heck of a job on inventorying the homes in the community and what their needs are as far as this drainage problem is concerned.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I got a question on this.
But,
When it says total, and he lists the number of, go through each of these columns. Does anybody, was this explained at the meeting?
Yeah, I explained it.
All right, we know the number of homes, then what's the next column?
Green F. What
No,
does-
number,
Number is cut off.
yeah, number of what?
No, I do not have.
Number of drain spouts,
Yes,
total number of spouts,
yep,
or total number of gutters. And then the next is total number of what's that?
Type of drain?
Different types of drains,
Drains.
the ones that go in the bubblers.
right.
one that goes to the front street level and one that
Oh,
goes to the
drain
pond.
front, drain pond.
Drain pond and drain front.
No, there's another one to the right is pond.
No, well, that's.
Right, front is the street.
Street.
Yeah, but that's
Drain
just telling us
is-
that some houses are draining to the front and some are draining to the pond, I think.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and bubblers, I'm not sure what the
To-
the
yeah.
next number, oh, on ponds.
And so many houses are on ponds.
Oh, I see, got it.
The ones
Got
that
it.
are actually on the ponds.
Gotcha.
The 41 out of the 96 homes are actually on a pond. What he's telling us.
Okay.
In the top one. In Portofino, 33 out of the 50 homes are on a pond. And only 8 of them, at least according to his survey, have complete gutters.
Mhm.
Or, yeah. And 5 of them have drainage into the pond.
So he's saying that the other homes don't need gutters?
Don't have.
Don't have them.
They need them, they just don't have them.
Don't have them. You know, one of the things that was mentioned, that even on the homes where it doesn't impact necessarily the drainage into the ponds, it makes a mess of the landscape.
Oh, it does, it does.
It makes a
Without a
terrible,
doubt,
it makes a
does.
terrible mess of the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, we agree with that,
Mhm.
absolutely.
I'm sure.
They share drains too, right, Bill?
Yes, they share, yeah, the drains are between 2 homes, so unless you're in an end home, you share that with your neighbor. You share the drain.
Well, depends on the housing section.
Yeah.
Because some of ours are far enough apart.
Apart
we
that they
wouldn't be
don't.
Sharing it, too far apart for any sharing.
Okay. Anything more on ponds?
Anything new on that one resident that had the continuing issues?
No,
with the noise? Anything new there that you know?
we have not, our decision at this point has been that we're not going any further.
Well, last time you brought, or Bob brought it up, he said that you could put up some sort of a fence or.
A fence, a pretty ugly fence, and
Yeah,
we
so is
decided
it-
against that.
Oh, okay, gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
I think they decided against that.
Okay.
Okay. John, you're on.
I'm gonna try to make this short, mainly because things have been progressing since 1 o'clock today, between 1 and 2. But originally, we prepared an exhibit that tried to outline all the assets at Pelican Preserve, who the owner was, future owner, maintenance, and I've discussed this at various meetings. This sort of correlated with our budget, with some line items, et cetera, and I thought it was very good for this advisory committee. Tony, liked the idea of the exhibit. He revised it, and I mentioned before, he wanted to do it as to exhibit B1, which would be existing CDD assets. B1, I'm sorry, B2, which would be existing CDD ponds. And then he wanted a C1, which would be future CDD assets under consideration, and a C2, which would be future CDD ponds. He also wanted to condense this. He didn't like so many of the line items that we had, which we then met, Tony, Cal, April, and I met after our last advisory meeting on the 19th, revised it, and that is the new exhibit, which is in your packet now. Tony had some revisions to this as well, very minor, but we will be revising this for Tony to attach to the new maintenance agreement, which we will then send to WCI, and hopefully at that point, the thing can be finalized, we hope. The other item had to do with the street lighting, and I will double check with that. But it does appear that Tony does not agree with WCI's request on the street lighting.
John, is this new listing, since it's more limited, definitive enough, in your view, to?
It's definitive enough in Tony's view for the agreement. But I think, that we should continue with a larger list that did sort of agree with, or the budget on a line item basis. You can see here that this was condensed. We go from 1, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13. I mean, we could and I think we will. I'll bring at the next meeting both reports. And Sarah and I are meeting again on Monday to revise the minor ones that Tony would like to do.
But this one could still be attached to the
This,
agreement.
Oh, yeah.
oh, yes,
And then the
this is
other
the
one
type that Tony wants, like a one-page thing,
A type
attached to
thing.
the
Mhm.
agreement.
Yeah. And the other one could be a working document.
Will be our working document that will continue to be revised as things get changed.
Okay.
But in having said that, the items that aren't there, item 2 or item 6 or whatever.
They were just underneath that.
They were,
for-
okay.
yeah,
So
right.
they're a subset of what
Of
you
each
got
of these
here.
items,
Of each of
right.
these, so they are covered, they are just a subset.
They're a
So
subset.
they're not new, they're not something where.
No.
Where WCI could say, oh, that's not really part of the thing. I mean,
Correct.
it's a subset.
Correct.
Okay. But that was really.
I have an old
that
one that
was-
I can
That's okay,
compare it
that
to.
was really
Okay.
basically my question now, okay.
All right.
I got a question, there's C1, line items 1 and 2. It says, this is landscape contract for Cypress Grove Phase 1 and Phase 2. This is the owner. The owner right now is the Master Association, is that what I'm reading that?
That has not been turned over, that is correct.
Future owner CDD, future maintenance is Master Association, not the CDD. Am I reading that correctly?
That's what we show here.
So,
I,
could we,
well, I assume it's like all the other CDD
Right.
assets where the master oversees it and maintains it, but it's a CDD asset.
Right.
but it says funded by the Master Association, future maintenance and funded by PPCA.
Where, you're C1 or B?
C1,
C one.
1 and 2, Cypress Grove, Phase 1, Phase 2, landscape. I'm looking at that, and I'm reading that to mean the Master Association is gonna fund it in the future. Even though the future owner is the CDD. See my confusion? We've got, that's the stuff we've got budgeted in our budget for landscaping, right?
Well, when we say funded, is funded capital funding?
I thought this is for the landscape, it says landscape contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that would just be your regular
That's
monthly.
just the landscape contract.
Right.
I'm
Oh, yeah.
trying to understand, this is saying, the owner right now is the Master Association, the future
No,
owner
the
is.
current owner now is the master.
Right.
already been
co-owner,
owned.
Eventually it'll be
master,
turned over to CDD.
But all of the maintenance, future maintenance and funded by is all
If,
Master
if I may
Association.
clarify, I think what this is saying, it's not saying future funded, it's saying current owner and funded by currently is PPCA. So maybe we need another line that dictates, because right now it's being funded by the PPCA, but if it does go to the CDD, then it will be funded by the CDD at that time. It's just currently,
Okay,
that's
so
the status.
That confused me on the.
Yeah.
Because I see PPCA on almost everything here except for the stuff that says WCI. on the
It's
bottom.
currently, yeah, it's currently funded by, because it's a future CDD asset
See my
potentially.
confusion? Cause,
So that's-
because
yeah,
I would love to be able to
in-
use that as a budget document.
In the yes,
Yeah,
your
but-
point is a good one. So in the
Yeah.
future, it will be funded by the CDD, once it's turned over.
So WCI turned it over to the master. No?
Okay, then
No,
what
we're
does-
just paying for it out of the master.
Why are we paying for it out of the master if WCI hasn't turned it over to you?
That's a good question, and that's one I've been asking. It's because, and
Sean, one of the board of directors, Sean Gillis, is currently going to be researching that and looking into it but the answer was because they deficit fund at the master. They currently are paying for it. And I said, it could be looked at, though, it still shouldn't be coming out of the Master Association funds, even if WCI is paying it by deficit funding. So that's what we're currently looking into.
Oh, okay, but it's still WCI funding and not the residents. funding
Correct.
it, Paying for it, all right. Okay.
Should, are we saying that you want another column here?
Well, I was hoping to be able to go to Nancy here and say, when you do your
I'll
budget.
take anybody's suggestions.
You see all that future stuff, that'll all just be in your budget somewhere.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm hearing. If it says future owners, CDD, all of that should be in our budget somewhere. Am I correct?
Well, one of the things, and I'm sorry April's not here, because one of the benefits of having April is whoever sits in that chair should be going to WCI and saying, what's the timetable when you would turn this over, so that when Nancy and Chris
Right.
work on the budget,
They have some,
they have some guidelines
Yeah.
that maybe,
Sure.
maybe for half a year, we budget for it, or maybe it's a 2-year down the road thing.
You need to know the projection.
Yes,
yeah.
we absolutely need to know the projection.
Any suggestions on how to put that in an exhibit?
No, they won't. I don't
Well,
think so.
Without changing the entire thing, I mean,
Yeah.
we have-
Okay.
who's the owner now, who pays for it now? Who's the owner in the future, who pays for it in the future? I mean,
So we're okay with what's on here?
well, I don't know, because I don't see anything that says funded in the future.
Yep.
Well,
Because what
I
I'm,
thought-
what
isn't
I'm
the
hearing is the
last column?
CDD fund for it, if it's under the owner column in
I
the
think,
future.
Sarah,
Even the things I say WCI. is
John,
paying for
on
now.
this, if you could asterisk these things that WCI is deficit funding, just so that we know, we can identify that until WCI works it out, that, so that we don't think that it's the residents at this point. And just have a footnote.
have an asterisk there with a footnote, deficit funded.
Yeah,
At this
deficit
time?
funded by WCI at this,
You may as well put another footnote that says, wherever future owners CDD, is responsible for future funding.
But it's the same stuff, isn't it?
Well,
Or I'm not sure.
well, no, because the master is paying for stuff right now
Yes.
through deficit funding.
Mhm.
In the future, CDD is gonna get ownership for it, and the CDD's got to pay for it.
Yes, right.
Well,
And
we've got-
that's what I don't get from these headings.
Yes, that's what I'm saying,
So
but,
that's what I'm saying,
but,
another note that says
I'm
that.
talking about, isn't the deficit funding and the stuff that the CDD is gonna pay for in the future one and the same?
I would, as
And
long as,
certainly
the
on the-
CDD is listed as the future owner, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, if the CDD is gonna be the future owner, which it is on all of these things, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And some of them aren't being deficit funded.
Oh, you're
There's
right,
stuff
some
on
of
the
them are
bottom.
not, but,
Some of them are.
but on, even on some of the ones that are now being funded by WCI, eventually CDD will.
CDD will be
So,
paying
so
for it.
you've really got two footnotes.
Yeah, that was
You've
my
got
point.
you've got an
Right.
A and a B. You've got ones that are deficit funded and will be funded by the CDD, and then you've just got ones that will be funded by the CDD, which is all the WCI ones.
and
Is that right?
and what we need is a projection of when that is gonna happen. What is WCI's wish list of when that's gonna happen at this point?
I'm not gonna, there's no way to put that on here.
No, just two,
No.
no,
No, for.
we need it
This
for
is
budget.
just-
For
just
budget
a-
purposes.
that-
They need it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's not
No.
on here, this is for
Yeah.
budget purposes. Ron, a very good point.
So that becomes a sort of a blueprint.
Blueprint for the
Anything
budget.
that you see CDD in there, there
Mhm.
should be some reference back to the budget somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments, requests?
Okay, anything else? Okay, that's it for John. The meeting schedule, we're scheduled up through April, I think. Probably a good idea to keep a couple of months ahead of the schedule. Diane, when are the May meetings?
For May, May is the fifth and is that the 19th?
May fifth is a Thursday, but there's a board meeting that day.
That's what I'm asking. And
It would be the twelfth available or the twenty-sixth?
no, I'm asking for board meetings. The
You know,
fifth
when
and
we're,
what
we're,
if
we're the 12th.
19th?
Yeah,
We would be the 12th then.
yep. Okay, so I can't do the fifth, I'm out of town.
I'll do the fifth, cause I'll be leaving
Okay,
in June.
okay. John will do the 5th of May. I can pick up the
You've done a lot, I can do the 19th.
19th, all right.
And at what point, what we need to do is, keep Nancy in mind for when the first budget presentation, when our budget goes forward, cause she needs to maybe not come by herself, but at least come to that meeting. And then maybe after the budget's done, get into the flow of, if that's, how does that sound? Is that,
Yeah, I think the budget will kind of take a lot of my time up for the next.
Yes,
Yeah, oh,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, you don't need, you don't
I'll
need,
leave 6 or 7 weeks?
you don't need to do this.
I think I only have till May.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't need to do this, okay. So we're set,
So we're good.
John on the 5th, is it, and yeah, and, Nancy,
you're kind of the default person, you're,
yeah,
Phil, so let's let you have a break.
Nancy Hall on the 19th. Yeah, and we just set these in advance, you know, if something comes up for people, you know, I'd ask that you know, make your own arrangements, try and reshuffle with somebody else. Okay? Committee member requests? Any?
Well, April's not here. Any further status and when we think roads and or landscaping will be turned over? But April's not here, she's the only one.
Well,
Might know the
Diane,
answer
is
to
she
that.
tied up in a meeting or on a call?
Let me go check.
Cause we need to let her know she needs to be checking
Yeah.
with WCI to get back to us on what WCI is projecting, so we can budget appropriately.
Okay. I know that the north end of Gateway Boulevard, we've got a ways to go, because we still have to do lights, we have to do irrigation, we have to do planning, and then they'll do the final section of road up at the end. I still
You're
need-
talking Gateway
Gateway
Boulevard, that's
Boulevard.
not,
Yeah, we're talking about Cypress Grove.
Oh, you're talking about Cypress Grove?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's the one we've got budgeted.
I thought you were talking about the road turnover for
Yeah.
county.
Well, Cypress
Oh,
Grove is.
no, no, road turnover in the county's got nothing to do with
Yeah,
us.
no, that's,
Thank goodness.
It's enough of a, enough of a problem.
That's been on the table with this district since, I probably started coming to meetings in 2006. And it's been on their agenda to get done all this time, and now it sounds like it's getting close to
actually
happening.
getting done.
Yeah, nothing,
There are some specific things they have to finish before
Mhm.
it's.
Okay, I talked to,
Executed, but-
I talked to Danny after our last meeting regarding turning over Cypress Grove, Tablazi their, final lift-wise. And Danny agreed, and he made comments, but I mean, I don't know what the status of that is.
I don't know, but I'll put is there another meeting before, yeah, there is another meeting before, who's going to the next meeting?
I'll tell you, it's right in here. Let's see, it's April, let's see, no, it's
March.
March 17th, Geppert.
Either he can do it or I can do it on April 7th, it's just
Ask the question.
ask the question about, are we gonna, how is this gonna be handled, are you gonna do it under performance bond or what?
Right.
'Cause it,
Present it that way.
mhm.
And this is the, what, the road
Turnover.
lift?
The-
No,
No, the actual turnover of the road.
Turnover.
I mean, how are we going to fix the problem on Pelican Preserve
Right,
Boulevard
that's
that was
John's-
caused by the final?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
John's issue, right.
You can,
April, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're looking at, we have a requirement in our agreement to get our budget done by May.
Right.
Turn it in, which means we just have one more meeting and that's April. Ahead of that meeting, Nancy Olson is gonna be working on our budget with Sarah. But what we need to know is there's a whole bunch of things that, is up in the air with WCI. Like turning over the preserves was one that,
Yeah,
will
so,
there be any more lake turnovers?
I don't have a schedule of anything yet, but what I do, know is that, last week, the week before, I believe it was, WCI met with, Calteek, and, we started a, priority list of all of the turnover projects, and
okay,
what's.
are you
what-
talking about turning it over to the county? Is that the subject you're?
the road.
We're just
about
talking
something
Pelican.
different. That's
We're
We're
what I'm
talking about Pelican
Pelican
Reserve.
Reserve.
Pelican
Not-
Reserve.
not-
To
not
the district.
Hmm?
I'm talking about the stuff coming to the district.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
good.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
We're
that's what we're
talking
talking about.
about Pelican
There's
Preserve.
stuff coming to the district.
To the district,
Mhm.
that's what this is.
Okay.
And I haven't got a schedule from them yet, but I know that this morning, I sent in a request, Tyler from Tetra Tech
Mhm.
is working with us on it. And, I sent in a request because WCI is asking for a walkthrough on the Track L for Phase 1 Cypress Grove and the Matarita Drive. And so I wanted to know, so I would imagine that that would be the next thing that we do a walkthrough on and a punch list. We've done the ponds walkthrough, and, Tyler is coordinating with them on the schedule to get that stuff fixed. And so we're trying to fast track some of the stuff the best that we can, but as far as a schedule just yet, because we're just now in the walkthrough and the punch list phase, I do not have a schedule
Okay,
yet.
here's what typically has happened in the past.
Mhm.
WCI will have a wish list, of when, it sounds like some of these things they want to have turned over right away. And it's gonna be up to the supervisors whether they take them when WC wants them to take them or not.
Right.
But some of the things may be on, not on their early wish list, like, for instance, I don't know, some of these neighborhood things and
Right.
the preserves and so forth. And we need to know within the fairly short time frame what their guesstimate is of when they're gonna be coming to the district.
For budget,
Yeah.
to know how much
It's
we're
gotta
gonna
be-
have to maintain.
It's gotta be an estimate.
Yeah, see,
Okay.
Cal's concern is a little bit later down the road than ours. We have to have our budget in by May.
Well, I think probably what I need to address, with these conversations of of the punch list, because I know we're fixing to start talking
Mhm.
about the budget, and it'll be the first time for me, and, so let me go ahead and present that question of, hey, you know, we really need a rough estimate of what is the real
Mhm.
reality of us needing to prepare a budget for the maintenance
Yes, of
of
that.
this stuff.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can do that.
preserves, ponds, roads, landscaping, the whole 9 yards, anything that.
Well, anything that realistically is going to become our responsibility in the immediate future, that's going to affect 2017.
17, yes.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
fiscal, it's fiscal
that start
2017.
October of
October
17.
To October 8th.
Okay,
Yeah, that's great.
That's good.
Okay.
And then Nancy Olson is the one who really needs that information.
So you can start putting numbers
well,
together.
and
Well, and
if we,
Sarah.
if
Well,
we can
yeah.
Sarah.
even get something, we may end up just having to create some budget amounts and put it in there, whether or not we actually get
Well,
it turned
we-
over to us,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? We may just have to caution on,
We've been down
on
that
the
road.
safe
We've been
side,
down that
right?
road, and we wanna be conservative. We wanna be sure
Right.
that we, you know, that we've got funds in there that, you know.
And I'm just now getting my feet wet in this process, so let me find out and ask the question, you know, what is the reality of us having to maintain this stuff and have a budget for it in 2017, and
It's-
see if I can't get them
It
nailed down
seems to
something.
me the estimate ought to be earliest possible, right?
Yeah, the earliest
Yeah.
possible.
Earliest possible.
Okay,
And,
Like,
and-
we've been carrying some stuff for 2 years.
Yeah.
We carried preserves for 5 years and didn't get it.
Yeah.
You know, so we're aware that sometimes things get budgeted, and then they don't happen. And they may not happen not because WCI isn't ready to do it, but it may happen because the supervisors aren't ready to take it.
Yeah.
For
Yes.
one reason or another.
right, it's a pretty large, project, and, the way that I understand it is some of the initial plans and stuff are very old, and so we're struggling with that.
Mhm.
So it's patience, that's the only thing that I can, that's the only thing that I know we're going to need right now.
Well, because Nancy and Sarah are shooting to have something ready for us to look at by our
Okay.
next meeting, which is April
12th or something
12th?
like that.
April 14th.
April 14th.
Okay,
So,
I will add that to my list.
I know, we just need ours a little ahead of probably what you're doing, because somehow you got granted more time than we did to get our budget stuff together.
Well, have you been provided something in the past from WCI? What have you been provided? So you said that you've been carrying some budget, for several years on some of the things. What have you been provided in the past?
That it's come from the person who's sitting in your seat has talked to WCI and told us
Okay.
what they anticipated doing. So, and it really, it's less so now than it was before, but you would think it would be more in their interest to give us a realistic time frame, because the district is charging them the same as they're charging residents for all of the unbuilt homes, the ERUs. They're getting all of the ERUs that haven't been sold.
Yeah, I think WCI definitely is motivated. It's just a matter of coordinating it all and making it come together.
Yeah, so a conservative estimate, and we'll plug in what we think we need.
Okay. All right.
Does that make,
Strange question. If the private roads were turned over to the CDD, does that make them public?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, The answer is yes.
And that's something that we've been
I'm not sure that's
talking
good or
around
bad.
and talking around and talking around,
Okay.
is, do you, if you, you know, do you want that to happen and then down the road deal with privatizing the whole thing when the bonds are paid
Well, I
off?
don't know that we play a role in that directly.
Well,
Well,
you know, I think the issue becomes that if you don't turn them over to us, they turn them over to the Master Association where they have control.
where, and they become not public at that point.
Point.
Well, they're not public now.
They're not public now, and if they go to the master, they're not public. If they
Right.
come to the district, they then become public.
Public, yeah, and.
Are some of the roads already public then right now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Our main
Our main-
thoroughfare,
Just Pelican Preserve Boulevard.
And all of the, you know, communities
Yeah.
that directly lead to it. Those are all public roads.
Those are public roads,
Cypress Grove and beyond are all private right now.
yeah. But everything in
Private.
Old Pelican Preserve are public.
So if somebody wants to come in the gate, do they have to let them in?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
That's,
Because
we
they're
are.
so it might as
everybody's-
well be that the others are public too, because
Right.
once they're in the gate,
Right.
They
I
can
mean,
go
Well, they can go
anywhere.
anywhere
as,
they
as
want,
I keep
obviously. You can't
reminding
control that.
people, we are not a gated community. We are a limited access community,
There you go.
and there's a difference.
Big.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one, because the problem is timing, and also,
Mhm.
they get, if you turn them over, if you wanna keep them private, and you turn them over to the Master Association.
It gets to be, there's a lot of complications with it, separating them and turning them over to the master, when in fact, they're pretty much public roads anyway,
Anyway.
once somebody's inside the gate.
Right.
And then if there ever is a day when those roads can be privatized, which hopefully they can, then just do it all at once.
Yeah,
That's been the consensus.
yeah, I think so.
It might be the it is not gonna be
It's not
easy no
gonna be
matter what
easy.
we do.
It's not gonna be easy no matter what, no.
Right.
And.
But we
and the-
we might as well
and the-
continue the way we're
and-
doing
and
it
the
at this
back-
point.
And the back gate comes into play too, at
Yeah.
that point, so, okay.
Are we done?
Any audience comments?
Oh.
Gail?
I just have one. It was about the monuments, the cleaning stuff that you were gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
They accidentally put $4,000 worth of lighting up there. Did they ever credit us back with it?
Accident.
There wasn't any accidental.
They put lighting on those front monuments when it was supposed to be lighting along our drive. Remember
No,
that?
it wasn't.
Tracy had installed some LED lights at the front, the colonial entrances. I think maybe 4 per sign. I'd have to go back and look at the proposal, but yeah. And remember when I brought the LED lighting at the other one?
Yeah.
There was the understanding that she was supposed to be putting it at that entrance perhaps, but I don't know. I don't know the history there. I just know that there are some LED lights up there as well. We also have some burned out bulbs and ballasts that I just found that they're saying maybe we should convert those to LED, but I'm working on proposals for that.
Who did it by mistake?
I don't know if it was by
Master
mistake.
Association.
I don't have the history to know if it was by mistake. I just know that there were LED lights installed up there on those signs, projected on those signs. It was in one of the weekly updates that I saw back when Tracy was doing it, that they had been installed.
Well, and we may not have paid for them, I don't know.
$4,000.
You did.
You paid for them.
I
This came up at
recall,
one of the meetings that
I
was
recall that the problem was that the only lights that were on those monuments were being diffused through the pond, through the water.
To the founders.
And when they were diffused through the water, they got old and there was problems, and the monuments did not light up at all. And it was brought up here at the meeting to at least put some projection lights on the monuments, and it was approved.
Not the monuments, not the ones on
Yes,
Colonial and
that's,
Tree Line.
I
Just the
know, I
ones-
brought that up 2 years ago when we were doing the inspection of those monuments.
I think you should check back the records. I don't
Either way, I mean, when you say that it's gonna be paid for by the master and funded, but they were in very, very bad shape. They had to be done.
I'm wondering whether the minutes of the meetings at that time would address
Sure.
this.
I just pulled up the, proposal and it was approved, CDD approved on 6/18/2015 out of 706,559 to install, 2 on the east, 2 on the west for the tree line and colonial sign lights.
Right.
The way it was
Line and colonial.
presented to
It was
us.
tree light and colonial, I remember that
Yeah, I
specific.
remember it too. Yeah, we talked about tree line and colonial. I'm vague. When was that, Sarah?
June
Um,
15th.
It was approved at the June 18 meeting,
June 18th of
15.
15.
15.
But wasn't it supposed to be lighting just on our entryway, not down there?
We're
When you guys-
supposed to
No.
have,
When you guys originally talked about it?
we
No.
approved additional lighting
Yeah,
for,
Right.
And that was well before then.
it was well before that.
It was
yeah.
before that, had nothing to do with colonial's monuments. Colonial monuments were discussed as a separate item.
Well, be
well,
worth,
Sarah has the documentation, and that's what we approved, for it to be on colonial and tree line. And that's apparently what was done.
When you guys were doing all that major discussion about, I think, the stops, the four-way stoplight or whatever, the stoplight, Gary wanted a stoplight at where you put the four-way signs, three-way signs. And he also wanted more lighting for the guardhouse and some other lighting right in there. I thought that's what you decided to do.
No, we approved that, something like that separately.
Separately, yeah.
There,
It was separate?
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think so.
All right.
I think that was
That was
early,
done,
that was back when Mary Beth was still here even.
no,
No,
that was very recent.
I don't think it was that,
No.
because I kinda remember it.
I just remember bringing it up once before,
Hmm.
about him putting it in the wrong place.
Not aware of it, but I'll go back and check the minutes. Any other comments? Don?
I have one, but it's probably not worth it. The private drives, when somebody comes through that gate, they cannot go on the private drive,
Unless invited.
unless invited.
When you say the private drive?
Well,
Roads.
Well,
Yes.
the only place people coming through the gate, other than
That-
Pelican
that's right,
Reserve,
that they're only
is
permitted
the
to go
town
on-
center, and
That's a
No.
private
that's
road.
it.
That-
No.
No,
That's a private road.
even
too.
Veneto is a private road.
Benito's a private road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But-
think they're only allowed on Pelican Preserve Boulevard.
Well, all the,
Right,
no,
yeah.
all of the communities, that's all, those are all public.
Well,
Bellagio, Portofino,
But,
those are all
but-
public.
But how do you,
but
how do you
Sienna,
police that?
Sienna owns
Yes. Can't-
their road.
And so-
Ours is
so
private.
is
Theirs is
Ravenna.
private.
Yeah,
Ravenna,
and
part
so is
of
Ravenna,
Part of
yeah,
Ravenna's
Sienna.
private.
And part of, the one-way in the back.
Plaza.
Plaza.
Right,
Plaza.
those are private. And you're right, they shouldn't be going on those, but that's the same thing with Cypress Grove. Once they're in the gate, how do you stop them?
Well, I should think that the management company should tell Ameriscape that our road's private.
Why
not to
doesn't the
use it.
association post it as private?
It's
We did.
posted.
It is posted.
Well, then,
Then I think it's up to the management to let Ameriscape, one of their vendors, know not to come there.
I was just, you just was saying that you couldn't stop them to go on a private drive if they come to the gate, well, that's not correct. It's probably harder to do than it's worth, yes.
You can,
Well, unless
you
you
can
put a-
tell them that they're not
Yes,
allowed on
there
that.
you go.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
and in
fact,
theory, don't
But I
they,
remember a meeting you just had not too long ago where they said that they'd have to post where they can go when they go through the gate. You wanted Cerritos to do that because some are private, some not, which is.
yeah, I
Well,
thought,
they're given a map.
We were
saying
gonna be
you're
given
allowed
a-
in these roads, but not in these
we were,
roads.
yeah, they were supposed to be given a map as to where they were allowed to go, or shown a map as to where they were allowed
But
to
it's
go.
not.
is it Ameriscape's doing the master association work? Is that what you're complaining about? Not Ameriscape's doing your property?
Ameriscape does not do our property,
Okay.
but they have to come on our property to do supposedly master association. used to park on our property without permission.
They don't anymore.
They were, I believe, told not to do that, but they still drive in and park along to do master association work.
Which is pretty much they have to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what
They
can they
don't
do
have
otherwise?
Yes, they do. Why didn't I know?
Well,
They've got other places they can come through.
Yeah, I suppose if we researched it to do master associate, they probably are, I would suspect we'd find out they were probably permitted under some, but, I don't know, is it a problem? Is it a huge problem? I mean,
It used to be, it's a little bit under control now, as we've been on with it. They used to park their workers' vehicles there and go work someplace else all day.
well, if we're gonna be doing a new contract with our
yeah.
landscape companies, that's clearly something that we can make clear to any of the bidders on exactly where,
Mhm.
you know, where they're not permitted to be parking.
Yeah,
And driving, I mean, they drive behind our property too, to get to other places. They drive their lawnmowers and
Mhm.
stuff, I don't know. I
Well,
just think
if
they could come in from someplace
It
else.
used to be every Friday night or whenever they paid them, they congregated down around our circle, and they would fish out of the pond. They
Oh,
actually
for
netted
heaven's
fish,
sakes,
Yeah,
and that has been stopped.
good.
Which neighborhood are you in?
See,
Yeah.
Sienna.
That
that's
should,
when we put the private sign.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's all that's been stopped, so it's.
Mhm. Any other comments? If not,
motion
motion to adjourn?
to adjourn?
Second.
Made and
Aye.
seconded, the meeting is adjourned. Appreciate everybody's being here.
Whoever's doing post orders, I don't
Like
know
this
how,
is-
I don't know